Chapter 236. Cilia was the chief priest of the Legion of Anu of the Hittite kingdom. She should be in Meso City at the moment. Why was she here, and why was Seagull with her? Seagull was the last disciple guided by Ammon so far. He was the least experienced among the divine emissaries of the Garden of Eden, but because of his relationship with Crazy Ol, his identity was incomparable to that of the other disciples. He was also guided by Nietzsche, but Seagull was even a few decades earlier than Ammon. When Ammon met him, Seagull had already achieved the 8th level. What Seagull practiced was not the power of two sides. He was actually an 8th level magician, or rather, an 8th level spiritual bird. He was different from ordinary people. His practice was particularly difficult, but at the same time, he also had many special talents. When Seagull received Ammon's guidance, he followed Gabriel to the Garden of Eden and then to the city of Talon. Knowing the relationship between him and Ammon, the disciples took good care of Seagull. Ammon only had time to guide the process of practicing and testing the power of origin, and then went to the underworld of Osiris. Many specific magic and martial arts practice had not been taught, but everyone was willing to guide Seagull when they had time. Seagull had a very good temper and was curious about everything in the world, like a diligent and good child. As a spiritual bird who had just come to the human city from a deserted island, there were many things to learn. Aesop did not arrange any specific tasks for him to be responsible for, but Seagull was very enthusiastic and willing to help with anything, so he was very popular with everyone. He had decades of practice, and his mind was pure. After receiving guidance from the power of origin and various teachings from everyone, he made rapid progress, and in less than a year, he became an 8th level divine emissary. But as an 8th level divine emissary, he was still relatively immature in all aspects, because he had not experienced anything, and naturally could not be compared to Medanzo, who had been exploring with Ammon since the beginning of practicing the power of two sides. However, Haiwu also had an advantage. In the past few decades, he hadn't thought about anything else at all. He had been cultivating wholeheartedly. It was very difficult for other cultivators to do this, so his magic power was very strong. It just depended on who he was compared to. When he arrived at Salem, the Legion of Anu of the Hittite kingdom entered the plains of Duk to fight against the city of Marduk. The two armies were in a stalemate, and the Hittite army had also built the city of Meso in the southern part of the plains of Duk. Lung City was the logistics and supply base for the Hittite expedition. Hence, there were many people coming and going from Lung City. About a year ago, Princess Cilia came to Shaling, and Aesop naturally had to receive her grandly. In the city lord's mansion, all the important figures in Canling City attended this meeting, and Seagull was also present. This was the first time that Hai Ming had attended such an important diplomatic event, and he was quite nervous to see the princess, afraid that he would make a fool of himself. It was really George's fault for not explaining Princess Cilia's origins clearly in advance. Because everyone already knew each other, he only made a special introduction in front of Seagull. George first went to the princess and introduced Seagull. Naturally, it was not convenient to say that he was an oracle from the Garden of Eden in public, so he only said that he was Ammonius' new disciple on earth. Then George said to Seagull, "This charming and beautiful princess is also a powerful 8th level mage, and a famous summoning mage on the continent." This was supposed to be a normal compliment, but Seagull's face changed, his legs softened, and he was so scared that he plopped down on the ground. What's going on? Seagull was no longer as timid as before, but there was one sentence that had long been deeply imprinted in his mind, like a brand into his soul. When Crazy Ol left the island, he once said that the distant continent was very dangerous, and there were powerful summoners who would brand his soul and use him as a summoned beast. Hai Ming was so scared that he did not dare to leave the island in the sea for decades. This was the only nightmare in his pure heart, and the powerful summoners on the continent became demon-like existences in his mind. He was already nervous today, and after hearing Idu's introduction, the devil from his dreams was standing right in front of him. It was as if he had been cursed, and his legs went soft, causing him to lose his balance. This caused Sylvia to jump up in fright. Cilia also asked curiously, "What's wrong with Seagull?" The beautiful princess listened and giggled. The more she looked at Seagull, the more she felt that he was simple and cute. Although the explanation was clear, Seagull was still very nervous when he saw Celia. He listened to whatever Celia said, as if he was afraid of being captured and branded with a soul brand, as if it had become an instinct. When George saw Seagull behaving like this, perhaps he was purposely playing a prank, or perhaps he wanted Seagull to train his courage. He actually appointed Seagull as the official receptionist of Taling City, to follow beside Princess Cecilia to ensure her safety. In reality, he would help Cecilia with anything, and would accompany the princess to hunt in the wilderness. The more Celia looked at Hai Ming, the more she found him interesting. Whenever she spoke a little louder, Hai Ming's face would turn red and he would look very nervous. This was not because he was afraid of her identity as the princess of the kingdom, but purely a habitual reaction. Later, Celia called Rulio over and had a spar with Seagull. In the end, Rulio was no match for Seagull. This shy disciple of Amon was actually so powerful. After Celia finished her business, she wanted to return to Meso City. City Lord Aesop sent Seagull to escort her. His main task was to escort the convoy of supplies. Celia asked Aesop, "What is Seagull's position in Taling City or Taling Army?" In the end, she found out that Seagull was currently unemployed and was still learning and training. So the princess took the opportunity to make a request, wanting to borrow a person from Taling City. This request was exactly what Aesop wanted. Aesop was thinking of sending Seagull to Meso City. At that time, the Hittite army had already built a dock on the inland lake, and Meso City was in the midst of construction. Aesop was eager to build a good relationship with the other cities and grasped the situation there. It would be best to send someone that both sides could trust. This person must have a clean background and would not cause any fear. At the same time, he must be absolutely loyal to Amon, and also be able to gain the other party's goodwill. It was really not easy to find someone, and Seagull was the perfect candidate. The astute Aesop could also see that Celia seemed to like Seagull very much, and that Seagull should really gain more experience, so he immediately agreed. When Seagull came to Meso City, Raphael also guessed Aesop's intentions, so he suggested that the princess appoint Seagull as her personal guard captain. The original personal guard captain of the princess was an imperial general. Due to the needs of the war, he could be transferred to the front lines. Celia happily agreed. Indeed, there was no personal guard captain more responsible than Seagull. He didn't know how to be lazy at all. Seagull was originally a seagull that had gained intelligence. Later, he gave himself the name Seagull, but Celia told him that this shouldn't be his first name, but his surname, indicating his origin. So Seagull gave himself the name Michael, and his full name was Michael Seagull. Before the war between Taling and Enril City broke out, something happened to the trade route in the Charcoal Marsh. This trade route was also one of the logistics routes between Meso City and the Hittite kingdom, so Princess Celia attached great importance to it. She had always paid attention to the situation in Taling, so she sent Rulio to assist Al-Mar in guarding the Charcoal Marsh. Rulio was a descendant of the seductress mermaid, and could display magical abilities in the marsh area. Then, the battle between Taling and Enril City was unfavorable, and the situation was precarious. City Lord Aesop sent someone to ask for help from Princess Celia. His request for help was very particular. According to normal official procedures, he would either ask for help from the Hittite kingdom, or ask for help from Meiji City, but Aesop went directly to Princess Celia. At that time, the commander of the Anu Legion, Aimi, was in charge of the army in Meso City. When Sylvia approached Aimi to request for him to send troops to assist in the evacuation of Lung City, Aimi refused with a troubled look. There were two reasons why Aimi could not do so. On the one hand, the mobilization of the army required the order of the king, and the Legion of Anu could not make the decision on his own. On the other hand, there was an agreement between Taling and the Legion of Anu that the regular combat troops of the Legion of Anu could not enter the territory of Taling. This was originally a mutual measure of mutual respect, but now it had become an excuse. In fact, the attitude of the Hittite kingdom towards Taling was to wait and see. They would provide logistical support, but not direct military support. Even if King Ashur knew about this, he would not mobilize the army. Seagull was so anxious that he cried. He immediately asked Princess Cilia to let him go back alone to rescue Taling. At this time, a respected old man came to Meso City. It was Goliath. Cilia hurriedly asked Goliath what to do. Goliath frowned and said, "Commander Amy cannot mobilize the army without permission. This is also a decree of the kingdom. However, your highness can visit Taling in your private capacity. This does not violate any agreement, and you have the right to bring your personal guards to protect your own safety." After saying this, Goliath looked at Cilia. Everyone knew what it meant to bring her personal guards to visit Taling at this time. It all depended on whether the princess had the heart and courage to do so. In the end, Cilia slammed the table and ordered Seagull to assemble the personal guards. Seagull was so touched that he almost cried again. By the time Amy heard the news and rushed over, the princess had already left. Amy was shocked. Cilia was the chief priest of the Legion of Anu, and also had the responsibility of supervising the army. Furthermore, she was the princess of the kingdom. If anything happened to her, Amy would not be able to bear the consequences. Even if the princess returned unharmed, he would not be able to bear the consequences if she held a grudge against him. With a bitter face, he quickly asked Goliath for advice. Goliath stroked his beard and said, "There is a war in Taling, and it is indeed dangerous for the princess to visit at this time. You should send someone to protect her. Remember, this is sending someone to protect the princess. It is justifiable." Amy immediately reacted and sent 500 cavalrymen out of the city to protect Princess Cilia. The number of Princess Cilia's personal guards was not small to begin with, and because of the war, there were 300 elites. The cavalrymen sent by Amy were also the elite main force of the Legion. These 800 people rushed to the front line of the battle between Taling and Enril. Although Amy did not receive orders to send troops to participate in the war, he only sent someone to protect the princess. If the princess brought this cavalry to the battlefield, and the king blamed her in the future, the princess would be the one to bear the blame, not to mention there was Goliath as a witness. Even King Asher had to give Goliath face. Amy was still a little worried after the cavalry was sent out. He said to Goliath worriedly, "The princess has never really been to the front line. I am afraid that she will get involved in the battle as soon as she arrives in Taling. Although the cavalry will protect her, I am also afraid of accidents. Respected Supreme Mage, what do you think?" Goliath waved his hand and said, "This is really worrying. How about this? I will also go to Taling and see the situation there in the name of a private visit." Amy finally heaved a sigh of relief, and was very grateful to Goliath. If even Gaulier went, no one would be able to blame him if anything happened. This arrangement was already extremely benevolent. It was rare that Sir Gaulier, who was respected by the entire nation, was willing to help like this. In fact, Goliath's intention was to save Taling, and he would bring as many soldiers as he could. According to the current situation, it was too late to send infantry, and it was impossible to mobilize the chariots. 800 elite cavalrymen was already the best result. Goliath gave a few more instructions to his student Raphael before leaving. He set off after the cavalry, but he arrived at the front line first and took over the command of the battlefield at the most appropriate time. At the critical moment when the two armies were locked in battle, Cilia and Seagull arrived with 800 elite cavalrymen and inserted themselves into the battle formation to become the final force to decide the outcome of the battle. There was also a thrilling scene on the battlefield. Cilia had indeed never been to the front line, and it was unlikely that she would be able to do so given her status. For the first time, she led the cavalry to insert from the flank. As a supreme mage, she actually rushed to the front, leaving more than half of her bodyguards behind. She did not have time to set up a wedge-shaped defensive formation, and was in a very dangerous situation in the chaos. Seagull was also a veteran, but he knew the danger as soon as he saw this position. He immediately let out a long roar and rushed into the sky, transforming into a giant gull and diving straight down in front of Cilia's horse. Many of the soldiers of the giant legion were terrified and shouted, "Horus! It's the god of Igut, Horus!" Seagull's speed was very fast. He transformed into a giant bird and swooped down from the sky. There was no time to distinguish between a poison and an eagle in the light of the swords. When Ammon lost the Uruk legion on the battlefield, Horus had transformed into a giant eagle to help. This had already become a myth that had spread throughout the continent. When Seagull appeared on the battlefield, the first thought that came to most people's mind was Horus. The horror in their hearts could be imagined, and no one had time to think about how Horus could appear here. Seagull also did not expect that covering Celia's charge in a moment of desperation would have such a good effect on the enemy. Celia took the opportunity to lead the cavalry to break through the battle formation. The bodyguards and cavalrymen behind her also had no choice but to rush forward desperately because the princess had already rushed to the front and they had to chase after her to protect her. Princess Celia was unharmed, but Seagull, who was covering her, was seriously injured. Samir, who was in the battle formation, realized that something was wrong when he saw the cavalry suddenly appear and shot an arrow at Celia. The black magic arrow used by Samir was very precious, and it was impossible to shoot many in a row, so he only prepared 3 arrows and used other arrows in battle. This last black arrow was shot at the supreme mage Celia, who had escaped the protection of her bodyguards. If it hit Celia, she would not be able to block it. Seagull transformed into a giant bird and landed on the side of Celia's horse to block the arrow. He was seriously injured on the spot and was rescued by the cavalry behind him. When Seagull woke up, he was already lying in the city of Salem. Princess Celia was sitting at the table in front of the bed, holding her chin in her hands and looking at him with tears in her eyes. In this battle, the Salem Legion finally defeated the Giant Legion, beheaded and captured more than 2,000 enemies. The chief priest of the Giant Legion, Lucian, was killed, and the remaining enemies fled into the city of Enrol, relying on the city's defenses to hold their ground. Zhu Xian, the sky bow god, was shot down by Gilgamesh's arrow while covering the retreat of the remaining soldiers. However, the price paid by the Salem Legion was also huge. Nearly 1,000 people were killed and countless wounded. Seagull was seriously injured but managed to survive. Metatro and Edu were also injured. 3 of the 12 judges who followed Edu were killed in battle. The losses could not be said to be heavy. After this battle, it was impossible for the Giant Legion to leave the city to fight again, but the Salem Legion was temporarily unable to launch a siege. This was a tragic victory, and there were still many things to deal with. Aesop allowed the Giant Legion to send people out of the city to collect the corpses. At the same time, he buried the bodies of his fallen soldiers, treated the wounded, and rewarded the meritorious personnel. Ammonius only appeared on the battlefield once, and then he did not show up again. The rest was human affairs. His task as the guardian of the city had been completed. Ammon flew from the battlefield to the Saya Plateau, but he did not catch up with Enrol. That god obviously did not want to fight with him now. After sending out the oracle to fight, he stepped into the void and disappeared. Ammon was caught up by Murin. Murin asked Ammon about the process of becoming a god and told Ammon 2 things. The communication between gods was simple. The information imprinted into the soul could be clearly explained. Murin was also amazed by Ammon's experience of meeting Schrödinger again. She never expected that Schrödinger was Artemis, the god of the distant Olympian pantheon, who now had the achievement of the creator and was willing to lead Ammon to join the Olympian pantheon. But before Ammon had time to answer, he was summoned to the battlefield. Murin told Ammon that he was still not a match for Enrol. Enrol not only had the achievement of the creator, but he had also become the king of gods and cultivated for many years. No matter how strong Ammon was, he could not defeat Enrol at this time. The reason why Enrol retreated was also because he had always been used to planning before taking action. He would not act rashly before figuring out the details of Ammon. Chapter 237. Murin also told Ammon that, the test of fate, the judgment of the end of days, it was not just once. For the gods, they would experience it every time they entered and exited the immortal eternity. The intensity of the test was only related to what the gods did when they entered the divine kingdom or the human world this time. Sometimes the fall of gods was not because they were killed by someone, but because of their own actions, which was different from mortals with limited lives. This was what Artemis did not have time to tell Ammon. Murin imprinted the information into Amon's soul, then pulled his sleeve and looked up at him and said, "You have become a god who transcends eternal life, but you have not joined any divine clan. The agreement between the gods may have nothing to do with you, but if you don't pay attention, you may become the enemy of all the divine clans." For various reasons, the gods did not directly intervene in the struggles of the human world after transcending eternal life, and they could direct the oracles to assist their believers in everything. And the oracles more or less understood the path to transcendence and eternal life, so they were not willing to directly appear and participate in the struggles of the human world except for the mission that they had to complete. Needless to say, the oracles were also different from ordinary mortals, although they were still mortals. Especially after passing the test of endlessness and mastering the 9th level of the power of origin, those oracles could be called gods in the human world. Many ordinary believers could not even tell the difference between such gods and the real gods who transcended eternal life. Such 9th level oracles usually avoided conflicts that might lead to their death, and solved problems through various agreements like the gods. And as a real god, it was already a kind of agreement not to directly intervene in the struggles of the human world. Of course, this agreement was not absolute binding, but just the way the gods got along. After going through hardships and the greatest test of the human world, they finally obtained eternal life, and naturally they were unwilling to solve problems in the way mortals destroyed each other. Agreements were sometimes broken, such as the War of the Gods broke out within the various divine clans, and there were also conflicts between the divine clans. The result was clear to everyone that was the fall of many gods, but no one could guarantee that the one who fell would not be themselves. The fact that the gods did not intervene in the struggles of the mortal world did not mean that there would be no conflicts between them and mortals. It was just that most of the time, they were unwilling and did not need to intervene personally. Amon hadn't joined any god system yet, so in theory he didn't have to abide by this agreement. But in reality, breaking this agreement would arouse the suspicions of the other gods, and it wouldn't do anyone any good. However, today's situation was an exception. Ammonius had been directly summoned to the battlefield, and Faust and Samuel had shot out that arrow. That was a mortal's challenge. If Ammonius wanted to kill them, the gods would not have any objections, and it had nothing to do with the agreement. But from another perspective, Samuel and Faust were only fighting. Regardless of whether they were humans or gods, they were all enemies. That arrow had to be shot. After listening to this, Amon suddenly remembered something. He grabbed one of Murin's hands and said, "You Namna, back then at the Kenmit defensive line, in order to save me from Enkidu, you also violated this agreement by taking a sword to the battlefield." You Namna lowered her head and pouted slightly. "I like to hear you call me You Namna. I did enter the battlefield in a moment of desperation, and I tried my best not to reveal my identity. I wore the armor of your personal guard, and I didn't launch any attacks. I only blocked Enkidu's sword, but Enkidu recognized me." Amon, it was also in that battle that Horus appeared on the battlefield involuntarily, just like me today, so Marduk had an excuse. But you weren't involuntarily at that time, thank you. You Namna still lowered her head. "You didn't understand this until today, and I have been looking forward to you becoming a true god who transcends eternal life. Seth was waiting for you at the mouth of the Nile River, so I thought of a way to summon you here. But I almost fell into Enrol's trap. I knew that you couldn't bow to Enrol, and I wanted to bring you to join Marduk's camp in the Anunnaki divine clan. You have entered the eternal realm of immortality, and you should understand that the guidance of the divine clan is not only before you become a god. But now that Marduk has been losing ground, and you have the protection of a creator in the Olympian divine clan, I know what choice you will make, and I can fully understand." It was clearly a simple message that could be communicated directly through the soul, but Inanna just had to say it word by word. She lowered her head and pouted her lips like a girl who was about to give up her love. After Amon became a god, he felt that Unamna seemed to have changed a little, because he himself had become a god, and the feeling between the two had changed subtly. They could already enjoy eternal life together, but Amon obviously would not enter the same divine realm as Unamna. Looking at the appearance of this goddess, she was as delicate as the shepherdess on the step back then, and there was no need for pretense in the communication between the two gods, but listening to the tone of the goddess's voice, it was obvious that there was some bitterness, and there was also a kind of regret and grievance. Amon was originally burning with anger and swinging his battle axe to chase after another god, but at this moment his anger inexplicably turned into a soft feeling, and he put his arm around Yun Namna's shoulder and patted her gently. "Thank you for spending so much effort to get me out of trouble. After becoming a god, I will still not join the Anunnaki divine clan, regardless of whether Marduk lost to Enlil or not, regardless of whether Artemis appeared or not." I didn't have time to answer Schrodinger's question, but I can tell you the answer. The position of that cat in my heart has never changed, and I will always be grateful to Schrödinger himself or the goddess Artemis, but I will not join the Olympus divine clan. Before I understood the power of the origin, I had refused the greatest temptation on earth, and after becoming a god, I will not be swayed by another temptation. The image of the two of them hooking up had appeared countless times on earth, but at this moment in the clouds, this was the first time that Amon had taken the initiative to put his arm around Yun Namna's shoulders. When Yun Namna heard these words, she looked up in surprise and asked, "You won't join the Olympus divine clan? Schrödinger will be disappointed, and your situation is also very dangerous. Even if you join Marduk's camp now, I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to protect yourself, and you have also offended the main god of the Ennead, Seth." In Yun Namna's view, Amon's choice was tantamount to cutting himself off from the gods, and her tone was no longer sour, but a kind of concern and worry. Amon nudged her forehead with the tip of his nose and smiled. "Schrödinger will not be disappointed. She knows me very well, so she is only providing a possibility of shelter, but I can't rely on the shelter of the Olympus divine clan forever. Sometimes the gods would rather risk falling to make the necessary choice, such as I must kill Seth with my own hands." Yun Namna pouted and looked at Amon and said, "It seems that I don't know you as well as that cat, and because of Maria, I also know that you will not let Seth go. Maybe I made you miss the best chance to kill him. I didn't expect." But Amon interrupted her and said with a smile, "Goddess of youth and love, we can also have the achievements of the Creator." Yun Namna said with some grievance, "We? The so-called curse that the gods ridiculed me with was an obstacle to me becoming a creator, and I thought that when you became a god, this curse would be broken. But now you are not enjoying that eternal life, but will instead be in a more dangerous situation. You have made such a choice, and I am also in a very awkward situation." Amon held her soft body to his chest. "If I join the Olympus divine clan, I will be in a more awkward situation." What did that mean? Amon's shrine was in the city of Taling, and it was the divine realm of the Anunnaki divine clan, and Amon stood on the altar with Murin in his arms. But if he joined the Olympus divine clan, such a shrine would be tantamount to provoking a dispute between the two divine clans. He might as well not join any divine clan and continue to stand there with Murin in his arms, showing his attitude that although he would not join the Anunnaki divine clan, he would share the divine realm with Murin. Yun Namna finally smiled happily and rubbed her cheek against Amon's shoulder. "So you are so thoughtful. But I am worried about another thing. Do you know the oath that the gods make when they join a certain divine clan? There may be fights between the gods of the same divine clan, but they have a common oath. When a god outside the divine clan challenges a god of the same divine clan, they must not help the challenger attack the god of the same divine clan. That is to say, if Amon challenged Enlil, Yun Namna could not fight with Amon, and at most, she could only help the defeated Amon escape, such as the situation today. If Yun Namna wanted to challenge Enlil with Amon, it would be the best choice to let Amon join the Anunnaki, but Amon now had a powerful helper like Artemis, and as long as he joined the Olympian divine clan, he could get good protection. But Amon did not intend to join the Olympian divine clan either. If a god wanted to get rid of the oath of joining a divine clan, he would have to achieve the achievements of the god of creation and set up another divine clan. But this was almost impossible for the vast majority of gods. Amon leaned gently in Yun Namna's ear and said, "My wish after becoming a god is very simple, to kill Seth, and hope that I will be lucky enough to find the reborn soul of Maria, help you break the so-called curse, and finally build a divine realm of my wish." When Aman crossed the Saya desert to pass the test of endless life and death, he had made a vow. If one day, when I will pass the test of fate, my wish is not to join or build such a divine clan or become such a god. I want to build a home of faith, which can guide all who yearn for it, and not be guided by the gods. The so-called gods are no longer gods, but gods in people's faith. People can choose a heaven-like home in their lives, or endure the hell-like torment in their hearts. This is my wish to become a god, and the path under my feet will eventually lead there. The message was imprinted in Yun Namna's soul, and the goddess opened her mouth in surprise, looked up in Aman's arms and said, "My god, is this simple? You actually have such a vow." Aman replied, "Since the gods have eternal life, don't waste this eternity. I don't know if I can fulfill my wish, but I will go on like this." Yun Namna reached out and gently pinched his waist. "No matter how grand the vow is, you can only do what is right in front of you. You took so long to come back, can you go to my rose garden first?" "Aman, I will first deal with the Garden of Eden and Shalom, and then I will go to the rose garden. Right now there are 2 guests I must personally receive." Yun Namna suddenly smiled, and this smile was like a spring flower. "I understand, in fact, my curse does not exist at all. You go first, I will wait in the rose garden." Aman first returned to the Garden of Eden, and led the disciples to bury John and Themis there. He also made another vow: if he could see their new souls again in the human world, no matter where and how much time had passed, he was willing to do everything he could to guide them. After the war, there were still many things to deal with. Apart from Moses, who stayed in the Garden of Eden, the disciples all returned to Shalom. In the midst of the busy work, Seagull, who was recovering from his injuries, was the most leisurely and comfortable. Master Sursons insisted on personally healing Seagull, and every day, she used various magic to repeatedly test which kind of blessing had the best effect. Aman returned to Shalom, but he did not show up. Some things did not belong to the gods, and if he appeared in public, it would instead cause the people to gather around and worship him, which would affect the normal order of the city. In the district rebuilt by the Dushians, there were 2 buildings built by Ammonius himself. One was the small building where Maria used to live, and the other was the courtyard where Aman grew up. The structure was exactly the same as before. In the backyard next to the craftsman's workshop, there was an ordinary wooden table and 3 rough stools. Around this table sat the most powerful figures in the continent, and on the table was the best wine in the world. These 3 people were Aman, Goliath, and Gilgamesh. Aman did not appear here as a god. Without looking at the other 2, it was as if he had entered another time and space. He had grown up, but he was still a minor in Duk. Aman had made his name on the battlefield. Back then, he had led the army to fight against the Hittite army and the powerful Uruk Legion, and the other 2 armies were led by Goliath and Gilgamesh. The enemies who had once fought against various countries were now sitting together drinking wine. Goliath was still Goliath, but Gilgamesh was no longer the governor of Uruk. As for Aman, he had become a god. Aman first gave a toast to the 2 guests to express his gratitude, as if he was treating them to his own home. If it weren't for the help of Goliath and Gilgamesh, the Legion of Cold would not have been able to achieve such a great victory, and before the 2 of them rushed to the battlefield, they did not know that Aman would appear as a god. In other words, they did not know that the Shalom Legion would win, but they still came. Aman was not surprised that Goliath would come, but Gilgamesh's appearance was unexpected. Aman wanted to ask after the toast, but Gilgamesh had already answered Aman's doubts with a silent wave of his hand. Gilgamesh, who was no longer ostentatious, looked a little thinner than before. He was still wearing the coarse linen clothes of an archer. As a supreme mage, he did not carry a single instrument on him, and of course, he did not have a staff. He had cast message magic out of thin air, showing both a scene and a voice. It was a miserable scene of corpses strewn all over the ground, smoke rising from the ruins of villages and towns, mixed with the screams and cries of women and children. Many skinned corpses were hung on wooden stakes, dried under the scorching sun. From afar, it looked like hell on earth, even more terrible than the underworld that Aman had been to. This was the scene of the Assyrian emperor, Sinek. leading his army to pillage and massacre the kingdom of Babylon. Gilgamesh's voice came from the light. I was wandering in despair when I heard the news of the kingdom's defeat. I rushed there and saw it with my own eyes. Then, I heard that the Uruk legion was defeated by the Hittite kingdom. In the city where I lived since I was a child, thousands of my people became prisoners of war in Meso. Gilgamesh made a request as soon as he opened his mouth, not only to Ammon, but also to Goliath. He hoped to save these prisoners and not let them become slaves of the Hittites. Currently, the kingdom of Babylon and Uruk were unable to save these people. Other than a few nobles, they had also given up on the idea of redeeming so many slaves. Goliath glanced at Ammon, who nodded. Goliath said, I will do my best to help them reach Taling. Taling will give them land and freedom. As for whether to return to Uruk or not, let them choose for themselves. Ammon sighed. The Uruk legion actually suffered such a crushing defeat. Who was the commander? Gilgamesh shook his head. I can't say that they were incompetent. The kingdom of Babylon was defeated on the eastern front and urgently called for reinforcements. During the retreat, they were chased by the Hittite army. The Uruk legion covered the rear of the army as they crossed the river, so they suffered the greatest losses. There's no need to mention the commander, he's my distant nephew. As for the chief priest, at this point he snorted coldly and raised his head to look at Ammon. You have become a god. Although we used to be enemies, I have always admired you. You have also taught many geniuses. But this one doesn't seem like his teacher at all. Ammon frowned. Is he my student? Gilgamesh nodded. His name is Cain, and he is now a supreme mage. Back then he even practiced body arts under my guidance. But I thoroughly investigated your whereabouts in Uruk City, and many of his performances were beyond my expectations. Later, I realized that he was a student under your guidance. When Abel died on the battlefield, Cain followed the Uruk legion back to Uruk. Ammon only taught the brothers the first 6 levels of the power of 2 sides. After Gilgamesh left Uruk, Cain, without Ammon's guidance, made a breakthrough on his own and became a 7th-level supreme mage in the eyes of the world. When the Uruk legion set off again, Cain's identity was the chief priest. Prince Ben-Nut led the army to the capital, and the Uruk legion suffered heavy losses. Cain led the remnants of the legion back to the capital. Chapter 238. At this point, Ammon didn't need to hide anything anymore. He calmly replied, Cain and his brother Abel once saved me. In return, I gave them another kind of guidance. But at that time, my achievements weren't high, and I didn't expect that I would have this day. They weren't my students, and I didn't continue to guide them in their cultivation. Now that Abel is dead, I'll go find Cain when I get the chance. I want to ask him something. Gilgamesh suddenly asked, Did you teach them the secret to becoming a god? Ammon shook his head gently. No, I called it the power of 2 sides. I was still exploring it at that time. As he spoke, he imprinted a complicated message into Gilgamesh and Goliath's souls. It was the guidance of the power of origin, containing the secret to becoming a god. It was the summary of all his years of exploration. Goliath already knew about the power of 2 sides, but it was the first time he heard about the cultivation of the power of origin. As for Gilgamesh, he had asked Murin, but Murin didn't give him an answer. Only the gods' emissaries, who received guidance from the various divine systems, could learn all of this after swearing an oath. However, Ammon didn't receive guidance from any divine system. Today was the first time he revealed this secret to anyone other than his disciples. He didn't hide anything from these 2 old friends. Not only did the information contain the secret of the power of origin, but he also explained the principles of the various divine systems. He also explained the final test that the divine systems wouldn't mention when guiding the emissaries. Gilgamesh and Goliath looked at each other and fell into deep thought. Gilgamesh's eyes shone with inexplicable tears, but they didn't fall in the end. They were also explorers, but in this way, they obtained the answer they had been searching for many years. Gilgamesh finally understood why Enkidu died. He also understood the meaning of Enkidu's last words before he died. When Enkidu rushed into the gray vortex, he shouted at him, Gil! I finally understand. This is not the curse of the gods, but the judgment of fate. What Enkidu cultivated was not the power of the origin. He was a pure warrior. He had actually reached the peak of human achievement by relying on physical cultivation. When the final test came and he comprehended the origin of power, it was already too late to explain it to Gilgamesh. If Enkidu had succeeded, he would have become a god, the first god who had broken through the power of origin by cultivating only body techniques. Unfortunately, he had failed. After a long time, Gilgamesh was the first to speak. If I can reach that step, no matter what method I use, I'm afraid I won't be able to pass the final test. Goliath looked at Gilgamesh and silently sighed. This meant that Gilgamesh really wouldn't be able to pass the judgment of fate, judgment of Armageddon. Goliath already understood, but he didn't say anything. Gilgamesh picked up his glass and drank it, then looked around and asked, "Amon, is this where you grew up?" Amon nodded, "Yes, I grew up here. But now this house is new, while this used to be old." Gilgamesh put down his glass and heavily slammed it on the table, then sighed, "This isn't fair." The meaning of this sentence was very complicated. In terms of intelligence, Gilgamesh wasn't inferior to Amon. He was born the son of a city lord, so he enjoyed all kinds of glory and had an incomparably noble status. If he wanted to learn something, he would have the best teacher. If he wanted something, there would always be someone who would do everything possible to give it to him. Gilgamesh was arrogant and extravagant, but he wasn't an indulgent playboy. He had his own pursuits and ambitions, and he also had achievements that the entire continent envied. But what did Amon have? Amon had nothing. He was just the son of a drunkard, a lowly miner, and he lost his hometown and loved ones at a young age. Compared to Gilgamesh, this was naturally unfair. But Gilgamesh's words didn't mean this. He wasn't Amon, and he hadn't experienced all of this. The nobility that he had, General Amon also had, but he hadn't experienced the life that Amon had witnessed. If it came from someone else's mouth, this sentence might seem pretentious, but Gilgamesh seemed to be speaking from the bottom of his heart. Goliath muttered, "Maybe it's because life is so different that there's a need for that endless cycle of growth and death." Gilgamesh, if you cultivate the power of origin, I believe that you will definitely have some achievements. But back then, it was very difficult for you to pass the endless cycle of growth and death, not to mention the final step of transcendence and eternal life. Gilgamesh was slightly startled. He looked down at the empty cup in his hand and said, "You are right. You are the wise man of the continent. You understood the truth in a flash. It was indeed difficult for me to pass the endless cycle of growth and death. But now I am proving it in another way. It is not pure power, but an imprint in the soul." Goliath, every 9th level mage has a different way of advancing. Have you experienced the endless cycle of growth and death? Goliath recalled, "I advanced to the 9th level shortly after the Great Flood. In meditation, I saw the ups and downs of the people, and their thoughts seemed to be a reflection of my soul. It was a very similar experience, but not entirely the endless cycle of growth and death. It was a kind of breakthrough in mastering magic. The understanding of the soul depends on one's own feelings, and there is no clear guidance." Gilgamesh grabbed the flagon and poured wine for everyone. He raised his cup and toasted to Amon, "Thank you." Goliath also toasted, "Thank you for letting me understand all this and answering too many questions in this life. It may be too difficult for me to verify all the tests of the power of origin from the beginning, but at least I will not have unsolved regrets in this life." He was already one of the top supreme mages on the continent. Witnessing the endless cycle of growth and death was not a very difficult test for Goliath. But what made people speechless was that the first test of low-level achievement was very difficult for Goliath to pass. Looking back on his life, Gilgamesh also understood that it would be difficult to pass that test. The test of fate, the judgment of the end of days. They were the top masters of the world, and even had the power to fight the gods. But in this life, it was very difficult for them to become gods who transcend eternal life. But listening to their tone, there was more relief than regret. At least their lifetime of exploration had finally been verified. After putting down the cup, Gilgamesh said to Goliath, In fact, you can also go to the end of human achievement, just like Enkidu, he only practices body arts, while you only practice magic. You can also understand the origin of power at the last moment. It's just that, Goliath smiled bitterly and said, "It's just that I don't have such a strong bloodline, and I can't practice it. I can only catch a glimpse of the brilliance after transcendence when the test of fate comes." Then they seemed to have a tacit understanding and stopped talking about this topic. The secret of the power of origin had been understood. Regardless of whether there was hope to transcend eternal life or not, people like Goliath or Gilgamesh would not change their minds because of this. Changing the topic, they talked about the situation after the battle between Lung and Enlil. Enlil suffered a great defeat, and the main force of the giant legion suffered nearly half of the casualties, so it was impossible for them to leave the city in a short period of time. But this city was very difficult to take down. Defending a city was different from attacking a city. It did not necessarily need elite troops, just organized labor on the city walls. The city built by the Highland giants was tall and strong, and built a variety of defensive equipment. There were also a lot of resources stored in the city, enough to defend for a long time. The losses of the Lung Legion were also heavy. After 2 consecutive battles, more than half of the total population of Lung was lost, and more than a tenth of the total population of Lung was lost. In a long war of attrition, production and farming were needed in the rear. The current situation was impossible to launch continuous attacks. The best strategy was to not let the giant legion leave Enlil, and at the same time focus on recuperation and production in the rear. If the situation continued to develop like this, Enlil would surrender sooner or later, but there was one person who would never sit back and watch, and that was Emperor Sinek of Assur. The Assyrian Empire was currently at its most powerful period in history. The Kingdom of Babylon had lost half of the original 18 city-states of Kish on the west bank of the Euphrates River, and had to give up the newly established city of Marduk. The heaviest loss was the ceding of 6 city-states in the northeast. This was equivalent to half of the original land of the Assyrian Empire, and most of it was fertile farmland. The Assyrian Empire was now called the Assyrian Empire. Not only did it gain large tracts of fertile land and a large population, but its social structure had also changed. The Assyrian warriors became the new nobles and the upper class of the new territory, while the residents of the former Babylon kingdom were scattered and moved to become laborers at the bottom. The food and supplies they provided supported the Assyrian army to launch a new round of conquest, and more Assyrian laborers left production and became professional soldiers. After the kingdom of Babylon submitted, Sinek was full of ambition, and he would never be willing to give up the plains of Duk. What's more, he had already sent the giant legion to the plains of Duk and spent several years building a city, which was equivalent to stabbing a knife into it. At the end of the war against Babylon, when the power of the country was at its peak, he would never accept the result of being defeated by the small city of Salem. No matter the cost, Sinek would continue to reinforce the city of Enlil. The cost of the expedition across the Assyrian plateau was great, but why would the cruel Sinek care? All he cared about was his own achievements and the enjoyment of the achievements of conquest. Goliath analyzed Seneca's character, and without any great prophecy, he knew that the emperor would inevitably adopt a strategy. The foot of the Assyrian plateau would probably be littered with corpses, and the endless attacks would eventually break through the city of Salem. An empire like this, after accumulating power for many years, would suddenly rise to power very quickly, and it would seem invincible for a while, but the speed of its decline would also be very fast. But before the collapse of the Assyrian Empire, the first to fall was the city of Salem, encountering its strongest period of rise. The few people present were the most prestigious commanders on the continent, and they saw the victory in front of Salem, but there was no way to prevent the fate of defeat in the future, because the opponent was a cruel and powerful madman. Gilgamesh looked at the wine in his glass and said expressionlessly, "Gentlemen, if Salem wants to have a long-term foothold in the plains of Duk, it must first break the city of Enlil and expand its control to the foot of the Assyrian plateau. In the current situation, there is no possibility of military victory, and there is only one way, and that is to get rid of Sinek himself." Ammon already had this idea in mind, and when he heard Gilgamesh mention it, he also spoke up. Assassinate Cynic? He is not the Hittite King Lucier of the past. I have already seen a 9th-level supreme warrior on the battlefield, and the commander of the army of Enrol is also a great mage. Cynic is so cruel, there are too many people on the continent who want to kill him, so his defenses must be very tight. Even if experts like us assassinate him, the chances of success are very small. And there is another most important problem. The Assyrian Empire has embarked on the path of a military state. Even if we assassinate an emperor, it will not stop the advance of this chariot. Alexander tapped his finger lightly on the table and said, "So not only do we have to eliminate Cynic, but we also have to reverse the national policy of the entire Assyrian Empire in order to save the current situation. The 9th-level supreme warrior you are talking about is the Queen of Assyria, Samir. And you may have heard of that supreme mage, the sage of Assyria, Faust." Aman was taken aback. "Empress. She was the assassin who tried to assassinate the adoratress at the blessing ceremony of Isis, and Faust was the assassin's assistant. At that time, she was already the empress and the sage of Assyria. Why would she sneak into Igat to do such a thing?" Gilgamesh slammed the table and said, "That's why I said Cynic is a madman. The purpose of doing so is to frame me and Enkidu." Goliath interrupted, "Based on my understanding of Faust, it could be a ploy, but I didn't think that Cynic would be willing to send his own queen. After Enkidu, Samir should be the strongest warrior on the continent." Aman suddenly remembered what Yun-Namna once said: the gods agreed not to directly intervene in the battles of the mortal world, but there was one exception, a mortal who challenged or offended the gods, such as the arrow that Faust and Samir shot into the sky. He turned to Goliath and asked, "If we want to get rid of Cynic, do we first have to get rid of these two people? I can find an opportunity to do it." Goliath shook his head and said, "No, not only are they the people Cynic relies on the most, but Faust is also Cynica's most trusted person. But if we want to get rid of Cynic and change the policies of the Assyrian Empire, we need the help of these two people. Otherwise, just killing a single Assyrian emperor wouldn't have been of much use." Gilgamesh stared at Goliath and suddenly asked, "I heard that Faust is a friend of yours for many years, is that right?" Goliath nodded and said, "Yes, he is a good friend of mine, and we have a very close personal relationship. The reason why I say this is not because of my friendship with him, but because I know him. When I heard that Faust had come to Enrol, I knew that the army of Salem was no match for him, so I rushed over. And I'm afraid you haven't heard the latest news, but Faust is also quite dissatisfied with what Emperor Cynic is doing now." He introduced what he knew about Faust and Samir. Although Faust looked wrinkled, he was not old, only in his 50s. When he was young, he went to the Hittite kingdom to study under Goliath, and his outstanding talent and diligent spirit left a deep impression on Goliath. Later on, the two became very close and often discussed various issues through letters. Faust's hobby was not only magic, he loved to learn everything in the world, and it was said that he had read all the books in the Assyrian shrine archives, and could even accurately recite the contents of every page and every line of every volume. As far as Goliath knew, this rumor was true. Faust's title as the Sage of the Nation, and he was revered as the most knowledgeable person in Assur. And Goliath also knew that Faust was versatile, and he was also a master scroll maker whose level was not inferior to Nero in the past, but he did not make as many scrolls as Nero, because Faust believed that it was not worth wasting his limited life on such things. He had two wishes: one was to use knowledge to change the Assyrian kingdom and the world around him, and the other was to explore the path of liberation for mortals. Faust, like Crazy Ol in the past, tried to unlock the secrets of the gods and find a way to transcend life on the other side. But he used a different method from Aman, searching in the sea of knowledge. It was too difficult for him to succeed. As the chief high priest of the kingdom, Faust did not have the same experience and luck as Aman. Faust met Cynic, who put him in an important position, and with the guidance of the gods, he managed to turn the weak Assyrian kingdom into a powerful empire. It seemed that he had succeeded. But Goliath received a recent secret report. Faust was the staunchest opponent of Cynica's tyranny, and was even reprimanded by Cynic. Queen Samir stood on Faust's side, and the new policies that Cynic reluctantly implemented were also based on Faust's suggestions. There was another reason why Faust and Samir came to Enrol. Cynic wanted to slaughter more than 2,000 innocent civilians, and Faust and Samir wanted to stop him. In the end, Cynic took the opportunity to give these people to the king and queen as slaves, and sent them to the plains of Duk to carry out a mission. With Goliath's foresight, he could already see the fate of the Assyrian Empire's decline, and Faust could probably foresee it as well. Faust had worked hard for so many years, but this was not the result he wanted. The rise of the Assyrian kingdom had already sown the seeds of decline, and it had brought a terrible disaster to countless people. A person like Faust was probably suffering greatly in his heart. Chapter 239. Samir was now a 9th-level supreme warrior, and no one knew who had taught her martial arts back then. People speculated that it was her husband. Her husband was not King Cynic, but Samir's ex-husband, a general of the kingdom. This general was stationed at the western border of Assur. At that time, there were frequent conflicts between Assur and the nomads, and Samir followed her husband into battle. As a king, Cynic had many military achievements in his early years. Once, when he led an army to defend against foreign invaders, Samir's husband was also in the army. Samir secretly put on armor and followed her husband to the battlefield. During the fierce battle, Samir's helmet was accidentally knocked off by an enemy. Her hair fluttered in the wind, and she stabbed an enemy general with her spear, causing him to fall off his horse. Cynic, who was commanding the battle, happened to see this scene. In just a glimpse, the deafening sounds of battle seemed to fade away. In his eyes, there was only this beautiful girl. Not long after the battle, Samir's husband was impeached and executed. Samir disappeared for a period of time, and when she reappeared half a year later, she had become the queen of Assur. She was only 17 years old that year. No one in the kingdom dared to talk about this publicly. Some people said in private that she was a vain woman. There were also sympathizers who defended Samir. Under the king's coercion, a young girl had no choice but to submit. But then again, which widow in the kingdom did not want to become the queen? Goliath told the results of his investigation and finally lowered his voice. No one knows what happened between the death of Samir's ex-husband and the time she became the queen. But Faust once told me that Samir's marriage to the king may have something to do with the oracle. She must have been coerced. Now that she is a 9th-level warrior, she can make new choices that she could not before. Faust's experience was not a secret, but the legend of Queen Samir was quite shocking. Gilgamesh was about to speak, but Ammon suddenly closed his eyes, as if listening to some news. After a while, Ammon opened his eyes and said, "I've heard the latest news from the prayers of the people. I'm afraid this news has something to do with you." Gilgamesh shook his head and said, "I've already given up everything and am searching for the meaning of life while wandering. Is there any other news related to me?" Ammon then said to Goliath, "I'm afraid this latest news will be helpful to our plan." Goliath also shook his head. "Ammon, I know that you are already a god and have the means that mortals can't, so don't try to entice me. Just say it." Ammon said unhurriedly, "Emperor Seneca's ego is indeed inflated to the extreme. The kingdom of Babylon has already ceded 6 cities to him, but he is still not satisfied. He actually sent an envoy to King Hammurabi II of Babylon. He wanted to marry Princess Sisera. If Princess Sisera refused, he would gather his army and attack the other 2 cities of the kingdom of Babylon. Fearing the brutality of the Assyrian army, the 2 cities are already in a state of panic. The citizens are fleeing. When Gilgamesh heard this, he stood up and shouted angrily, "He's dreaming." Ammon and Goliath reached out to the table at the same time. 2 rays of light flashed and the crude wooden table was protected by the strongest divine protection in the world. Gilgamesh then slammed his palm on the table. Goliath smiled bitterly and asked, "Gil, do you still have feelings for Princess Sisera?" After a momentary outburst of anger, Gilgamesh sat back down and sighed. "Everyone knows that Princess Sisera used to be my fiancée, but that was only an arrangement made by the king. There is no love between us, not even a feeling. Now that things have come to this, it is even more impossible for us to have any relationship." Whoever Princess Sicila wants to marry is her own business. But no matter what, I don't want to see Princess Sicila and the kingdom of Babylon suffer such humiliation." Ammon and Goliath looked at each other and said in unison, "That's why Sinek must die." Princess Sicila was 25 years old. She had broken off her engagement with Gilgamesh several years ago, but she was still single. It wasn't because she liked someone, but because her identity was too sensitive. No one in the kingdom of Babylon dared to say anything about Gilgamesh. But if it was someone else, the situation would be complicated. The king of Babylon, King Hammurabi II, was old and childless. Princess Sicila was his only sister, and the rest of the princes were his nephews. The laws of the kingdom of Babylon did not prohibit women from becoming the regent or even inheriting the throne. There were even cases in history where the king of Babylon chose the most powerful nobleman to marry and inherit the throne. The queen could pass the throne to her husband, but whether it was voluntary was another matter. The fight for the king's throne depended on two factors. First, it depended on who would inherit the throne, and second, it depended on who could control the situation in the kingdom. Otherwise, even if the king inherited the throne, he or she would not be able to sit firmly on the throne. Princess Sicila was a famous beauty in the kingdom of Babylon. Ammon had seen her with his own eyes. But Sinek didn't just want a beauty, he also wanted the kingdom. The only people who were qualified to inherit the king's throne were Princess Sicila and the king's nephews. Prince Benut, with his outstanding military achievements, was considered a stronger contender for the throne than Princess Sicila. It wasn't hard to guess what Seneca's intention was. He wanted to marry Princess Sicila first, and then use the power of the Assur Empire to help Princess Sicila ascend to the throne. When that happened, he would either control the Queen of Babylon or force her to abdicate. Instead of using military means, he would use political means to firmly control the kingdom of Babylon. Perhaps it was because of Enlil's advice, but if Sinek married the Queen of Babylon, or if he simply crowned himself with the throne, he would truly become the Assur Emperor. The kingdom of Babylon would no longer worship Marduk. It would symbolize Enlil's complete victory, and this god would reunite the realm of the Anunnaki. Gilgamesh looked at Goliath and Ammon and said something chilling. "You must have guessed Seneca's intention. The kingdom of Babylon will find it difficult to refuse his request, and Princess Sicila has no choice. In fact, the easiest way to stop Seneca's plot is to kill Princess Sicila." Ammon frowned. "Do you really think so?" Gilgamesh shook his head. "Of course not. But I've been the governor of the city for a long time, and I understand the politics and officialdom of the kingdom. There must be someone who thinks so, and perhaps will do so whether it's for himself or for the kingdom. For example, Prince Benut's first choice is to kill Princess Sicila. Of course, he can't do it openly, but he can send an assassin to kill her." Ammon asked again, "But if he really does kill Princess Sicila, how will he explain it to the people?" Goliath interrupted. "Given the current situation in Babylon, there are bound to be warmongers and peacemakers. But as long as they are not traitors, they will not want to see Seneca's plot succeed. If Princess Sicila dies, it will most likely be declared as a suicide. The warmongers can use this as an excuse to unite the people of the kingdom against the common enemy." Ammon nodded. "So it was a suicide?" Goliath smiled bitterly and nodded. "This is a reasonable speculation. It may sound sinister, but this is the part of Zheng Rong that I hate the most." Ammon also smiled bitterly. "If that's the case, Sinek will definitely send someone to protect Princess Sicila. We can't let her die. He will do everything he can to stop her from committing suicide." At this point, he suddenly closed his eyes, as if listening to something. After a while, he opened his eyes and said, "One of my disciples has asked me to protect Princess Sicila in the kingdom of Babylon." While they were discussing this matter in the courtyard, Aesop, George, and the others were also discussing this news in Ammonius' palace. George, who was the high priest of the temple of Isis, also came up with a similar theory. One of the disciples could no longer sit still. He immediately prayed to Ammonius, hoping that he could protect Princess Sicila. This person was Medanzo. Back then, Medanzo and Ammon had saved Princess Sicila. Although it was a kidnapping directed by Princess Sicila herself, Princess Sicila had still rewarded him. Princess Sisela allowed Madanzo to follow her carriage back to King City and restored his identity as a noble warrior. But now it didn't matter much. But Madanzo was indeed grateful to Princess Sisela. Moreover, the beautiful Princess Sisela had left a deep impression on Madanzo. He had once declared himself to be her admirer. Madanzo's idea was interesting. Since he had saved her once, he might as well save her again today. On the other hand, he didn't want Princess Sisela to fall into Seneca's hands. Therefore, Madanzo's protection had two meanings. Gilgamesh asked curiously, "Seneca would send someone to protect Princess Sisela. I didn't expect that one of your disciples would also want to protect her. Who is this person? What's his plan?" Ammon answered, "Protecting and protecting are two different purposes. This person is the leader of my disciples. You've seen him on the battlefield, Madanzo. The bow in his hand is the one you used." Gilgamesh nodded. "This person is not weak. If he wants to go, then send him." Gaulier looked at Gilgamesh with a faint smile and said, "Don't tell me you won't go?" Gilgamesh replied as he drank, "I'm no longer the governor of Uruk. I will go to the capital of Babylon, but only as a wanderer to observe in secret. As for the hero saving the damsel in distress, leave it to Madanzo." Goliath continued, "If we don't talk about Princess Sisela, Seneca's actions are not a bad thing for our plan. He wants to marry Princess Sisela and make her the queen of Babylon. Therefore, Princess Sisela cannot be an ordinary concubine. But don't forget that Emperor Seneca already has a queen. What will Samir think? Will he dethrone Samir, who was born a commoner, or will he make two queens at the same time? If it's the latter, it's something that has never happened before. But Seneca should be able to do it." Ammon raised his cup. "No matter what Seneca does, Samir will not be satisfied. Moreover, Samir and Seneca didn't get along well, and he even scolded her. Now that she was defeated on the battlefield, it gave Seneca a good excuse to dethrone her. Compared to Samir, Seneca cared more about the kingdom of Babylon. It's natural for an emperor to think this way, but it's different for a woman. If Samir was forced to marry Seneca, and now Seneca is forcing her to marry another princess, no matter what his motive is, Samir will not be able to tolerate it." Goliath looked at Ammon with a faint smile. "God, do you know women very well?" Ammon shook his head. "I don't know much about women, but I can try my best to understand them." Gilgamesh also glanced at Ammon. "I don't know much about women, but he should know the goddess very well." Ammon changed the topic. "Princess Sisela's matter is complicated. Since Madanzo wants to protect her, I'll send him. Let's talk about what happened just now, Mr. Goliath. Although you have analyzed so many possibilities, it's hard to communicate with Faust and Samir. It's easy to think about it, but difficult to do it." Goliath stroked his goatee. "Since I mentioned it, I naturally have a way to sit down and talk with Faust. Ammonius, I'm afraid we'll need you to appear in some way, and we'll need Lung's cooperation." Goliath suggested that Ammon send an envoy to Enrol to discuss the exchange of prisoners of war. The envoy would also hand over a document, which would specify the time, place, method, and number of prisoners to be exchanged. The official document would also include some diplomatic language and praise for the gods. Gaulier would write the letter in the name of Aesop, the lord of Fallenberg. He and Faust had been old friends for many years, and the two of them had often exchanged letters, discussing all kinds of profound and difficult questions. Faust should be able to recognize Goliath's handwriting and the code words in the letter. Goliath would arrange a time and place for Faust to leave the city and meet him in a secret place. As for the content of the discussion, he would also explain clearly. He also promised to guarantee Faust's safety, stating that this was not a trap or a trap. If Ammon promised not to take this opportunity to attack Faust, Goliath would write the letter and wait for Faust at the appointed time and place. Ammon immediately agreed, promising not to take this opportunity to set up a trap for Faust. He then asked, "Goliath, you and I have no ill intentions towards Faust, but can you guarantee that Faust won't take this opportunity to ambush you?" Gaulier chuckled and said, "To live in this world one must trust and make choices. Ammon, if you could trust an enemy, who would you think of first?" Ammon looked at Goliath. "Of course it would be you. We were once enemies." If even Goliath was not worthy of trust, Then perhaps there was no one in the world who could be trusted. Crazy, old trusted Goliath back then, and even let him witness the last moment of his life. Ammon also trusted Goliath, and did not hesitate to hand over the command of the withdrawal of the Legion of Steel to him on the battlefield. And how could Faust, who had been Goliath's good friend for many years, not be unaware of this? Goliath's reputation in the Hittite kingdom was comparable to that of the gods, not because of any conspiracy or struggle. Goliath said again, "At the appointed time and place, even if Faust wants to ambush us, do you think the three of us will be afraid? As long as he does not mobilize a large army to encircle and annihilate us, at least self-preservation and escape will not be a problem." What he said was also very true. With the three of them together, who would they be afraid of? Gilgamesh was stunned. "Do I have to go too?" Goliath smiled. "Since you are already here, why not help to the end? That is also another battlefield. After Ammon sees Faust, it won't be too late for you to go to the kingdom of Babylon." Gilgamesh narrowed his eyes and muttered, "Whether or not Faust trusts you, it is a great risk for him to come out of the city to discuss this matter. As long as he is willing to come, it means that he has a plan in mind, and your plan may succeed. I don't mind accompanying you as a bodyguard." The three of them discussed the details again, and Goliath began to write the document of exchanging prisoners of war between Lung and Enlil. On the other hand, Ammon sent down an oracle. One was to order Aesop to prepare to send an envoy to Enlil, the other was to allow Medanzo to go to the kingdom of Babylon, but he did not tell Medanzo that Gilgamesh would also go to the kingdom of Babylon. In the palace of Princess Sisela, the beautiful princess was singing a melancholy song. "The beautiful legend has disappeared without a trace. I am sighing for the lost road of life. The song of joy has gone. I will bear the bullying of fate. The country and the city scattered. The wish of the past has also disappeared. The people are in pain. Even the praise makes me shocked. Those who once appreciated my voice are like duckweed drifting in this world, a long-forgotten mood. I once yearned for that solemn tranquility, but now my song is like the mournful sound on the strings, like the swaying fate. The world in front of me recedes, the past is faintly discernible, one by one." Those who really knew the princess knew that she was not without ambition. She had long been secretly coveting the throne of Babylon. In the name of traveling around the kingdom, she not only investigated the situation in various places, but also cultivated her own private forces, including the establishment of the city of Marduk in the plains of Duk. In the kidnapping incident of Medanzo and Ammon, Princess Sisela even tried to involve Prince Binut in the muddy water, taking the opportunity to attack the most threatening political enemy. With the departure of her fiancé, Gilgamesh, Princess Sisela had lost her most powerful political supporter. Prince Binut, on the other hand, was fortunate enough to become the kingdom's hero and rising political star. Before the defeat of the kingdom of Babylon, King Hammurabi II had decided to pass the throne to Prince Binut after his death and make Princess Sisela the prince regent, in order to stabilize the situation in the kingdom. Chapter 240. After the death of Handian Rabi II, no one knew who would be in control of the kingdom. But Prince Binut clearly had the upper hand. If Princess Sisela was smart, she would have chosen to cooperate with him to protect herself. But the situation changed too quickly. The Assyrian army suddenly invaded and the kingdom of Babylon was routed. The 6 city-states that were ceded to the kingdom of Babylon were also under the princess's control, including her fiefdom. This was a devastating blow to the kingdom. Although Prince Binut was defeated, he managed to gain control of the kingdom's army during the process of resisting the foreign enemies. He had now become the pillar of the kingdom. But that was not the end of the disaster. Sinek arrogantly ordered the kingdom of Babylon to marry her. With the princess's intelligence, how could she not know what the ambitious emperor was up to and what kind of fate awaited her? As long as she married Sinek, the Assyrian Empire would definitely support her ascension to the throne. Once she became the queen of Babylon, she would either be completely under Seneca's control, or he would force her to hand over the throne. This time, she was really kidnapped, and in such a noble and world-famous way. So she was singing alone. But her singing was interrupted by footsteps. The supreme mage who had been following her all this while, Perry, came in without announcing his arrival. Princess Sicilla turned around and asked, "What's the matter, Paley?" Perry's appearance hadn't changed much. This fair-skinned man with bright red lips still looked so coquettish. He squinted his slender and long eyes and said, "Your Highness, why is your voice so sad?" The princess looked at him. There were no tears in her eyes, not even any expression. She replied in a flat tone, "You must understand my situation." Perry smiled, which made him look even more coquettish. "My beautiful princess, of course I know what you are worried about. I don't think it's a bad thing that Emperor Cynic wants you to marry him. You will eventually have to marry someone. Which famous hero on the continent is worthy of you? Only the invincible Emperor Cynic. With your beauty and wisdom, you won't have to worry about not winning the heart of the Assyrian emperor. If you two get together, you will become the most illustrious monarch on the continent, the most beautiful woman and hero in history." Princess Sicilla was still expressionless. "Paley, I didn't expect you to be a lobbyist." Perry shook her head. "Your Highness, I'm thinking for your sake. This concerns not only the fates of countless people, but also your own. The Prime Minister of Assyria, Alpha, has sent a secret letter, promising that as long as you marry the Assyrian emperor, the Assyrian Empire will fully support you in ascending to the throne. From then on, there will be eternal peace, and both countries will be happy." Princess Sicilla raised her voice. "Peace?" Perry lowered her head and said, "Your Highness, please calm down. You and your wife will rule Assyria and Babylon like a family. This is also a way to achieve peace." Princess Sicilla finally showed her anger. The people of Babylon contributed food and resources, while the Assyrians became the conquerors. Is this your so-called peace? Not to mention that brutal massacre. Perry maintained her smile. "If you marry the Assyrian emperor and become the queen of Babylon, there will naturally be no more massacres in the kingdom. Your Royal Highness, I have been following you for many years. You have long had the desire to become a queen, and now is the best time to do so. Because of this failed war, Prince Vonnegut took control of this declining kingdom. Only by relying on the strength of the Assyrian Empire can you ascend to the throne. As for what to do after that, I believe there is still a chance." The anger on Princess Sicilla's face gradually faded. She asked with an expressionless face, "Are you suggesting that I feign civility with Cynic and marry him first?" Perry nodded. "That's not a bad idea. It's the best choice for you and the kingdom." Princess Sicilla waved her hand tiredly. "I understand what you mean. You may leave." Perry bowed. "Your Highness, please take care of yourself. I will be on guard nearby. If anything happens, I will be there at your beck and call." After Perry left, Princess Sicilla looked at the empty house and couldn't help but wipe away the tears at the corner of her eyes. She looked so pitiful and helpless. She realized that she was being watched. Her private house had been surrounded by detection magic arrays, and the one who was watching her turned out to be Perry, the supreme mage who had been following her and looking forward to her ascension to the throne. Perry might be trying to protect her, afraid that something bad would happen to her, or there might be other reasons. She knew the methods of this supreme mage. When she planned the kidnapping case of the Highlanders, the plot to frame Prince Vonnegut was also part of Perry's plan. Seneca's desire to control the entire Babylon kingdom was a disaster for many, but it was also an opportunity for others. A cruel king who wanted to control his great empire needed a group of nobles who understood the kingdom well to exercise his power. Perry followed Princess Sicilla for this purpose, and now Cynic could give it to him. Perry came to the front yard of the princess's house. There was another person waiting for him in the side hall. It was Cain, whom Amon had taught before. When Cain saw Perry, he stood up and asked, "What's the situation? Has Her Highness made up her mind?" Perry sighed softly. "Her Highness is still a little worried. But don't worry, I've set up a detection magic formation to keep a close eye on her. I won't give her the chance to make a wrong decision." Cain's voice trembled. "I want to remind you of another thing. Someone from Prince Vonnegut's side has proposed to assassinate Princess Sicilla. The princess would rather kill herself than submit to Cynic." Perry's facial muscles twitched involuntarily. I can think of someone who might do that. Have you found out who Prince Vonnegut is going to send and when? Kane replied, Prince Vonnegut is still hesitating, but sooner or later, some of his men will lose their patience. I'll inform you as soon as I have any news and help you protect the princess. It's best if you can take the opportunity to eradicate those people. Don't forget the Assyrian Empire's promise to us. Nothing must go wrong. Perry said bitterly, those people are trying to assassinate Princess Sisela and use her death to make a fuss. But we can also use the fact that Princess Sisela is married to Emperor Sinek to promote her virtue. She is doing this for the people of Babylon. Naturally, there will be warriors who will follow the princess and protect her. We can also use the hearts of the people to our advantage. Kane added, there will be warriors from the kingdom coming to protect and escort the princess. But you must be careful not to let any assassins sneak in. Of course I know that. I've been serving the princess for many years. I know who is trustworthy. They don't think like you. They really want to protect the princess. They believe that the princess is marrying Sinek for the sake of Babylon. They don't think like you. This made Kane a little embarrassed, but he didn't want to show his dissatisfaction. After a few more words, he hurriedly left the princess's mansion. Perhaps Amon did not expect that Kane, whom he had instructed to obtain a high position in the kingdom, would be bribed by the Assyrian Empire and become Seneka's helper. The prime minister of the Assur Empire, Alpha, had once sent a messenger to promise Kane that if the Assur Empire gained complete control over the kingdom of Babylon, Kane, the high priest, would enjoy unprecedented power and status. Alpha made the same promise to Perry. Kane left Princess Sisela's mansion, crossed half of the city and entered a brothel in Babylon City. His men in disguise were already waiting at the door. He was waiting for someone in a small parlor. Not long after, one of his men reported to him that a guest had arrived. When the door opened, it was Prince Benut's confidant, Gekate, who was also Prince Benut's teacher at the Academy of Magic. When Amon and Madanzo first met Gekate in Arcade, he was only a 6th-level mage. Now, he was already an 8th-level mage. With the rise of Prince Benut's status, Gekate had also become an important figure in Babylon. This was an era of chaos. There were all kinds of conflicts and opportunities on the continent, but at the same time, it was also an era of great talents. According to a rough calculation, the number of supreme achievers in the last 10 years was more than the number in the past few decades. It was as if these hidden geniuses had found a stage to shine in this chaotic world. Kane lowered his voice as soon as he saw Gekate. Has His Highness made up his mind? Gekate sighed. Princess Sisela is innocent. There are still many warriors in the kingdom who support her. Under the pressure of the Assyrian Empire, His Majesty the King had no choice but to agree to the marriage. But His Majesty also told Prince Benut to deal with the matter himself. But His Highness still couldn't bear to get rid of this aunt who is younger than him. Kane said anxiously, how can a man of great ambition be so soft-hearted? If Princess Sisela really marries Sinek, the fate of Prince Benut and the entire kingdom will be buried in her hands. Besides, His Highness knows very well that Princess Sisela tried to frame him. Gekate sighed again. That's what I told His Highness. As far as I know, Princess Sisela tried to frame His Highness more than once. Once, she claimed that she was assassinated and tried to link the mastermind behind the assassination to His Highness. But in the end, it was His Majesty the King who suppressed the matter. Kane reminded him, His Highness might be hesitating because he doesn't want to be accused of assassinating Princess Sisela. But you and I should know how to share the burden of the kingdom. Gekate nodded. That's right. That's why I'm here to discuss this matter with you. We'll do it ourselves. When it's done, I'll ask for forgiveness from the king in private. Kane frowned. This matter must not be made public. Do you have a plan? Gekate nodded again. I've come up with a complete plan. The first step is to assassinate Princess Sisela, claiming that she killed herself in order to resist the cruel Sinek. This will ignite the anger and fighting spirit of all the factions in the kingdom. The second step is for His Highness Benut to rise to the throne and rally the hearts of the people. The third step is to persuade King Hammurabi II to abdicate so that His Highness Benut can ascend to the throne. Only then will the kingdom have a new hope. Cain nodded silently. After a while, he said, "If we succeed in the first step, Prince Benut will have no choice but to act according to the plan. But first, we must make sure that nothing goes wrong in the first step. It's not easy to make a move in the capital. The best place to do it is when Princess Sicila is on her way to Assur. Inform me as soon as you're ready. Remember, don't leak anything." Gecate took his leave. Cain sat there staring at his slender fingers, deep in thought. This supreme mage was actually discussing with Peri and Gecate about protecting and assassinating Princess Sicila. It was hard to tell which side he was on. Perhaps he was weighing which side he would get the most out of. It seemed that Peri's envoy had arrived at Enril. Although the city was in a state of war, Peri had requested to exchange prisoners of war. This was also a signal. Neither side was able to start a large-scale battle at the moment. Otherwise, it would only result in a lose-lose situation. Exchanging prisoners of war was the wisest move. The document was delivered to Faust. Faust looked at it for a long time without saying anything. He agreed to the request to withdraw from Lung City and wrote a letter in reply to the messenger, confirming the time, place, number of people, and the number of concubines to be exchanged. According to past practice, exchanging prisoners of war was a signal to end the war. Enril had also responded affirmatively, indicating that this lose-lose war was over. But Faust knew very well that this was only a temporary calm. The real storm was yet to come. Emperor Cynic, who had already occupied 6 city-states of the Kingdom of Babylon, would never be willing to accept the defeat in the plains of Duk. The small withdrawal of Lung would not stop his lofty ambitions. It was estimated that it would not be long before new orders and a large number of reinforcements arrived. The price of crossing the Saya Plateau to launch an expedition was huge, but the cruel Cynic did not care about such a price. Cynic's strategy was brutal, but it seemed to be very effective. He wanted to recoup the losses of the war from the enemy. The fiercer the resistance of the city, the more tragic the massacre after being conquered. The land would be occupied, the wealth would be plundered, and the people who survived would be enslaved. Faust could already see the scene of corpses strewn across the land. The narrow and winding path through the Saya Plateau and the fertile plains of Duk would be littered with bones. The document sent by Peri's envoy was personally written by Goliath. Faust recognized it at a glance and also understood the code words in the document. He knew that Goliath wanted to meet him, and he probably knew what Goliath wanted to talk to him about. Faust pondered for a few days by himself, and finally decided to take the letter to Samir. If there was one person in this world that the sage could not bear to part with, then it was this Assyrian queen. Faust did not trust Samir as much as he trusted Goliath. He did not know how Samir would view this matter, but he did not want to hide it from her. Faust frankly told Samir that Goliath wanted to meet him, and he was ready to go. Samir was silent for a long time, staring at Faust with a scrutinizing gaze, as if trying to see through this sage. Finally, he asked, "Are you not afraid that this is a trap?" Faust shook his head. "I trust Goliath. Since he has already made a promise, he will not take advantage of this opportunity to ambush me. In this world, people are not the same, and Goliath is precisely this kind of person." Samir asked again, "I can imagine what he will talk to you about, but why are you telling me? Right now in Enril, no one can restrict your movements or ask about your whereabouts." Faust had a moment of impulse to say something, but in the end, he just lowered his head and said, "Look at my heart. I cannot hide it from you. In Enril, my fate is one with yours. No matter what risky decision I make, I must tell you." Samir withdrew her scrutinizing gaze and looked out the window. Even if Goliath is trustworthy, there is no guarantee that the others in Lung will not take advantage of this opportunity to make a move. If we lose you, it will be a disaster for Enril and even the Assyrian Empire, so I have decided to go with you. Faust hurriedly stood up and waved his hands. "No, no, no, Your Majesty, you must not take this risk. I am telling you this because I want you to know that if something unexpected happens, you can strengthen your defenses." Samir smiled faintly. "Esteemed sage, if you are not afraid of taking this risk, do you think that I am?" Faust's face turned red and shook her head. "No, no, no, I do not dare to doubt your courage. It is just that you are the Assyrian empress, it is not worth it to do this. Samir suddenly sighed and said in a commanding tone, "Then what else in this world is worth it for me to do? Since you know that I am the empress, then this is an order. I have decided to go with you, and only to protect your safety. I will not eavesdrop on your conversation with Goliath. You said that you do not want me to take risks, but what else in this world is more dangerous than being in the middle of a battle? I have already appeared on the battlefield, why can't I accompany you to such an appointment?" Faust took a step back and lowered her head. "That is the order of the Assyrian emperor. I do not want to see you personally charge into the battlefield. He has an empress like you, but he does not know how to cherish you." Samir gave Faust a meaningful look and changed the topic. "The place where you will meet is in the mountains of the Euphrates Valley. That place is 200 miles away from both Lung and Enril. It is impossible to mobilize the army deep in the mountains, and if there is any movement in Lung, it will not be able to hide from us. Even if it is an ambush by an expert, we can still escape. It is settled then. Go back and prepare." Faust excused himself, but when he reached the door, he asked, "Your Majesty, what do you think of the latest news?" Samir asked with an expressionless face, "What news?" Faust bit the bullet and said, "His Majesty Cynic is going to marry Princess Sisela of the Kingdom of Babylon." Chapter 241. The agreed meeting time was in the morning, and in the latter half of the night, Hammer and Faust stealthily jumped off the city wall and headed east towards the mountains of the Euphrates Valley. In today's complicated situation, not only were there great men attacking and defending each other on the plains of Duk, there were also gods quietly watching this place. They did not fly, but walked quietly in the wilderness, leaving the plains and entering deep into the mountains. The Euphrates Valley was located to the east of the plains of Duk. It was not as majestic and desolate as the Saya Plateau in the north, nor was it as vast and flat as the plains in the south. The mountains were steep and filled with ravines, and the valleys were lush with vegetation. From afar, one could see towering peaks. It was difficult for ordinary people to pass through, and it was also the best place to hide one's tracks. Naturally, Goliath had set the rendezvous here for the sake of secrecy. Faust and Samir arrived at the designated place at dawn, and at a glance, they could see that Goliath had made arrangements in advance to reassure both parties. It was an independent hill, surrounded by peaks that were far away, and the view from the top was very wide. This place was both hidden and able to detect movements in the distance at any time. There was a table and 2 chairs on the top of the hill, and Goliath was already sitting there waiting. The sun had not yet risen to the top of the distant peaks, and the morning mist was drifting in the valley. Dew hung on the wet grass, and the surroundings were so quiet that only the sound of birds could be heard in the distance. Halfway up the hill, there was a man standing there casually with his arms crossed, without any weapons. In the morning mist, there was an indescribable aura about him. It was Gilgamesh, the hero who had shocked the continent a few years ago. Samir stopped halfway up the hill, and without greeting Gilgamesh, he stood at a distance, facing Gilgamesh, and watched Faust walk up to the top of the hill. Goliath knew that Faust had arrived, but he did not turn around and stand up to greet him. Instead, he filled the cup on the opposite side of his seat with wine, and then he chanted softly, "Your swaying figure is gradually approaching, the once blurry image has appeared before my eyes. Is your heart still yearning for the dream of the past? The dream rises and floats in the morning mist, the breath of youth ripples in your chest, unable to calm down, looking back at the scene of the past. Could it be that the beautiful legend has disappeared?" Faust quietly sat across from Goliath and began to chant. Who is it that murmurs softly, the faintly discernible melody in the morning mist? Let the wine cup touch the lips, listen to the dawn's voice. Does it announce another beginning? Who can I still sing leisurely with, in this remote wilderness, under whose gaze, who is singing a song of consolation to form a new alliance? Their voices reached Gilgamesh and Samir's ears at the same time. They did not hide the content of their conversation. Faust wanted to take this opportunity to let Samir hear the conversation between him and Goliath. As for Samir's reaction, it would depend on the queen herself. Goliath raised his cup and asked Faust with a smile, how long has it been since we last met? Faust raised his cup in greeting. From the last time we met until now, it has been a full 10 years. I wish you well, old man. Goliath said, thank you for your greeting. You are really young and promising. You broke through the 9th level before me, so I should congratulate you, sage imperial preceptor. Faust lowered his head and said, I am ashamed. How dare I call myself promising in front of you? Goliath asked again, I am very happy that you can come, at least it shows that you are still willing to trust me. Although we are enemies on the battlefield, there is no barrier between us personally. Do you know what I want to talk about? Faust replied, do you want to talk about the latest situation in the Assyrian Empire and the continent? Goliath shook his head. No, the most important thing is not these. I just want to talk about your path and your choice. I have known you for a long time. You thirsted for the knowledge of this world, hoping to solve all problems and change the fate of the kingdom and the world around you. Under your many years of planning, the Assyrian Empire is now strong and prosperous. Should I congratulate you for getting what you want? Faust did not answer but began to drink. He drank very slowly, his lips touching the rim of the cup as he slowly sipped. Only after finishing the full cup did he put down the cup and said, Why do you have to laugh at me? If you have something to say, just say it. Goliath looked straight into Faust's eyes and asked, Then answer me directly. Is this what you want to see today? Is it the world of your dreams? Faust inadvertently glanced at Samir's ethereal figure and replied in a low but clear voice, No, the Assyrian Empire today is not what I want to see. Goliath continued to ask unhurriedly, Then can you tell me? What kind of Assyrian Empire do you want to see? There is no need to make assumptions about what has already happened. Let's start from the present and see if it can be done in reality. If you are willing, just say what you think in your heart. Ammon was not at the scene of the meeting between Goliath and Faust. He was a dozen miles away on a high mountain shrouded in rain clouds, watching the movements here. The vast valley was under his surveillance. On the table between Goliath and Faust was a death chaser lamp, on which Ammon had temporarily attached himself to an avatar. Like a statue of Ammon, he could hear the conversation between the two, and could even clearly sense the subtle emotional changes in the tone of the two. Goliath placed the death chaser lamp on the table without any concealment. Faust, of course, recognized this magical device and knew that it could be used as the control center of a detection magic formation. When the two were talking, they naturally had to constantly pay attention to the movements around them, but Faust did not expect that Ammon could use such a method to listen in from far away, as if he was sitting right next to him. This was a method that only a god could use. Ammon was monitoring the movements in the valley between the mountains, but he suddenly felt a little tightness on his back, as if he was also being watched. He was already a god, and his physical and mental senses were unfathomable. He could experience the slightest changes in everything in the world, so why would he suddenly have such a feeling? He did not need to turn his head to see clearly. There was indeed a person coming, stepping out of the void and appearing not far behind him. He did not sense any nervousness or hostility from this person, but the powerful aura permeated the mountain peak, imperceptibly making it difficult for Ammon to even turn around. Ammon slowly turned around without batting an eyelid to face the person, and asked in a deep voice, Marduk? The one who stepped out of the void was another god. Like Ammon, he had once explored and comprehended the power of origin on his own without the guidance of a divine clan, and reached the realm of transcendence and eternal life. Now, he was an existence even more powerful than Ammon, and also one of the two main gods of the Anunnaki divine clan, Marduk, who was worshipped by the kingdom of Babylon. Marduk had recently been steadily defeated by Enlil's offensive, and the kingdom of Babylon was also in a precarious situation. Looking at the current situation, in the near future, Enlil would reunite the entire Anunnaki divine realm, and Marduk's defeat was irreversible. But at this moment, seeing this god, he did not have the slightest look of a loser, and even seemed to be glowing. Marduk looked very young, with a stalwart figure that was unusually fit, and the armor he wore was engraved with exquisite floral patterns, revealing the lines of the muscles of his arms and calves that were so masculine and powerful. Ammon was already very tall, but Marduk's figure was half a head taller than Ammon, with a high nose, deep eye sockets, thick lips, and angular facial features, like a handsome warrior. Seeing Ammon turn around to speak, Marduk showed a dignified smile. "Yes, I am Marduk. Congratulations, my friend. Among the blessed gods, you and I should have more in common, because we have both had the same experience. I still remember when you were fighting against the Uruk army at the Kenmit defensive line. You called out my name in public and challenged me. I admire your courage." Ammon smiled faintly. "Yes, I once said on the battlefield, 'Invite Marduk,' and then took back that sentence. Everyone has their moments of youth and frivolity, and arrogance often stems from ignorance, so the current me will not challenge you." Marduk smiled and shook his head. "Don't be nervous, I was just joking. You must be surprised that I suddenly appeared here, right?" Ammon replied frankly, "To be honest, it's not too surprising. I knew you would appear sooner or later, but I just didn't know when and where it would be. May I ask what you have come to me for?" Marduk looked at Ammon with great interest for a long time, but did not seem to see any flaws, and said with a smile, "Ammon, I'm here to offer you help. I heard that you are in a very bad situation after becoming a god." Ammon grinned. "Thank you for your kindness, but you seem to have more troubles than I do now." Marduk let out a cold snort of contempt. "My troubles? Are you trying to say Enlil?" Ammon shrugged. "Isn't that so? The kingdom of Babylon has submitted to the Assyrian Empire, and as the main god, you should be aware of what has happened recently, right? Sinek is trying to take complete control of the kingdom of Babylon, and if that is the case, you will lose your divine realm and your position as the main god. I really didn't expect you to still look so pleased with yourself." Marduk curled his lips. "So what if that's the case? Do you want me to hide in the divine realm and cry like a bullied wife? Enlil can win on earth, but he can't hurt me. If I told you that I don't care about the position of the main god of the kingdom of Babylon, would you believe it?" Ammon shook his head and said, "It doesn't matter whether I believe it or not, it's up to you whether you care or not. You didn't show up today just to talk to me about this, did you? If you want me to join the Anunnaki, I have already refused." Marduk waved his hand and said, "No, no, no, joining the Anunnaki is not a very good choice for you, and if I were you, I wouldn't agree either. In fact, I wanted to talk to you a long time ago, but at that time you were not qualified to talk to me about any cooperation. As for today, the situation has changed." Ammon narrowed his eyes and said, "Oh, so you were also waiting for me to become a god? In that case, why did you send an oracle to stop my people from returning to their homeland?" Marduk smiled indifferently in the face of Ammon's questioning. "The gods have their own thoughts, especially a god like me. No god wants the miners of Duk to return there unless they believe in themselves. I just made my agreement, and in fact they have gone back. Unfortunately, Ammonius, your people don't believe in you either. I don't even know what kind of dream they made up, believing in something that doesn't exist." Ammon interrupted him. "That's their own choice. It has nothing to do with you, and your oracle did not stop them from returning to their homeland after all. Today you want to talk about cooperation with me, and who do you want to deal with?" Marduk sat on a rock and waved his hand to the west. "Is there a need to ask? Of course it's Enlil. We have a common enemy, and we can sit down and have a good talk." Ammon also sat down and asked with a frown, "Didn't you just say that it doesn't matter? Why do you want me to help you deal with him?" Marduk's expression was very profound. "It's not you helping me, but we helping each other. In terms of strength, it's more me helping you. I don't care what victory Enlil has won, but that doesn't mean I will forgive him, and Enlil will never let you go, just like Sinek will never let Talon go. Instead of waiting for them to come to us, why don't we discuss how to get rid of them now?" Marduk was perhaps the most optimistic person Ammon had ever met. He seemed to be indifferent to the war on Earth, and even though Enlil had the upper hand in the war for the divine realm, he still had an indifferent attitude. And he knew that Ammon wanted to get rid of Sinek and support a new ruler in the Assyrian Empire, change its cruel state policy, and destroy this war chariot of militarism. Marduk came to Ammon with another proposal for cooperation, to get rid of Enlil. His tone was so casual, as if the name Enrol was just an ordinary code name, no different from a cat or dog, and not the other main god of the Anunnaki who had already forced him to retreat. His idea could not be said to be unreasonable. No matter how much trouble Enrol made on Earth, no matter what kind of victory Assyria and Hittite achieved against the kingdom of Babylon, if the god himself fell, then the desire to unify the Anunnaki would be nothing more than a futile effort. In the eyes of Amon, the same was true of Seneca's ambition for supremacy. But it was easier said than done to get rid of Enrol. The process of this god unifying the Anunnaki divine realm was not just for the sake of vanity, but it did indeed give him greater power. What's more, Enrol was astute and had the achievements of the creator. As long as he did not make a mistake and court death himself, there was almost no possibility of him falling. Just like Marduk, although he had been forced to retreat by Enrol, it was difficult for Enrol to have the opportunity to kill the god himself, and the result was nothing more than another agreement. But Marduk also told Amon that according to the oath of the gods of the same divine clan, if Amon took the initiative to challenge Enrol, neither Marduk nor Murin could help. But the situation was not necessarily the other way around. If it was Enrol who took the initiative to challenge Amon, others could intervene to help Amon. With Enrol's cunning, if he really decided to attack Amon, he would not give him a chance to find help. Fights between gods with the purpose of destroying the other side were often very tragic. Enrol did not seem to have any intention of doing so at the moment. He only needed to win on Earth to force Amon and Marduk to the point where they had no place to stand, and he did not need to do anything himself. But there was one situation that Enrol absolutely could not tolerate, and that was if Amon sent someone to assassinate Sinek, completely destroying Enrol's plan to unify the divine realm of the Anunnaki divine clan. At that time, Enrol would feel that leaving Amon behind was his biggest mistake, and if Amon was unfortunately alone and gave him an opportunity to take advantage of, Enrol would definitely make a move. After listening to this, Amon smiled bitterly and said, "Great God Mar, I understand what you mean. You want me to be the bait to catch the big fish, Enrol, but why should I take this risk to help you? As a way of solving problems between gods, what kind of agreement should we have?" Marduk's expression was full of confidence, as if he was not worried at all that Amon would refuse, and said unhurriedly, "Of course you will be willing to cooperate with me. The reason is very simple. You and Enrol have a grudge, and it is impossible for you to compromise with him, and he will never let you go. Enrol just wants to find out more about you first and wait for the best time to get rid of you. So you should find an opportunity to show your strength, and there is no need to hide anything, because you are no match for him. Under certain circumstances, Enrol will definitely make a move as soon as possible, because he will feel that if he continues to keep you around, you will be a bigger and bigger disaster, and the threat you pose will even surpass mine." Amon asked, "Under what circumstances?" Marduk stretched out his hand and pointed to the small hill in the middle of the mountains. "That is Goliath and Faust, right? One is the chief honorary elder of the Academy of Magic, the highest priest of Hittite, and the other is the irreplaceable chief high priest of the Assyrian Empire, the sage of the nation. The reason why the domain of the source of divine power is because of the faith of the people. I think that Goliath has probably turned his back on the worship of Enrol. If Faust agrees to get rid of Emperor Sinek and destroy Enrol's plan under your persuasion, it will also mean that he has turned his back on the main god that the kingdom believes in. The leaders who are supposed to call on the people to believe in the gods on earth have turned their backs on the gods. Do you think such gods are winners or losers? That would be an extremely dangerous signal, and even if Enrol nominally unified the divine realm, I am afraid it would mean that he is losing the true source of divine power. The source of all this is because of your appearance. If you were a mortal, it would be fine, and it would not take long for you to die, but you are already a god who has transcended eternal life, so you must be dealt with as soon as possible. Chapter 242. Mardodon replied, "Yes, I am asking you to be the bait to lure Enrol into making a move, which is a great risk for you. If you have any requests, feel free to state them." Amon thought for a moment and said, "First, you can't attack me, you can't take the opportunity to get rid of me as well, including your divine emissaries. Second, The people of Denlenburg have their own gods, and you can't force them to change their beliefs like you did before, nor can you interfere with their election. Marduk laughed. There is no problem with the first condition, and it is perfectly normal for you to make such a request. As for the second condition, I can also promise you that even if my believers occupy the entire continent, I will not interfere with the beliefs of Denlenburg. But I want to remind you of one thing: people believe in gods not because they are born to believe, but because they can get spiritual comfort from the gods, or because they can fulfill their desires in the name of the gods. Things change, people's hearts change, and the descendants of Denlenburg will also make different choices, and when that time comes, you will probably be looking at your own statue. This is not a violation of the agreement. Amon nodded and said, "Okay, it's a deal. When everything is ready, how should I notify you?" Marduk replied, "You are also a god, and you should know that there are many shrines of Marbuks in the world that can summon me." Amon shook his head and said, "If Enril wanted to kill me, he would not have given me the chance to summon you." Marduk chuckled and reached out into the air, as if grabbing something in the void, which condensed into a blood-red stone. He handed the stone to Amon and said, "This is the blood I shed in the test to become a god. Crush it with your magic power at the right time, and I will naturally appear. Remember, when using magic power, please call my name Bushuan." Amon took the blood-red stone and was slightly startled. "Bushuan?" Marduk stood up and said with his head held high, "This is my other name. I have many names in the world. Please do not reveal it to anyone." After saying that, he turned and stepped into the void. Amon shouted from behind, "I'll tell you my plan in advance, little." Then he would crush the stone at the most appropriate time. "But you should provide another kind of assistance." "How can I get rid of Sinek?" Marduk's voice came over, "That's your business, deal with it yourself. But I can give you 2 small hints." He left confidently, but left a message imprinted into Amon's soul, saying 2 small matters. First of all, the origin of Queen Samir of Assur was actually related to the mermaid king that Amat had guided during the battle of the gods of the Anunnaki. The name of the seductress king was Siren, and he disappeared after the War of the Gods. Neither Giraffe nor Yugalu knew where he went, but Marduk and Enril found out his whereabouts later. The Mermaid King was a kind of mutated siren from the depths of the ocean, and Amon had seen Sylvia's summoned beast Rulio, who was a mermaid king and had developed intelligence and cultivated successfully. Back then, the siren of the Mermaid King came to the continent in this way, but he was luckier than Rulio, accepting the guidance of Amat and becoming a powerful divine emissary of the Ennead. In the Battle of the Gods, the siren was badly injured, and after his escape, it was finally difficult to treat, so he made a choice: to give up his body in this life and start anew with his spiritual imprint. When Batet made the choice again, he still went to be a cat, but the siren became a human, born in the northern city of the kingdom of Assur. On Earth, a newborn baby grew up and gradually awakened the imprint of his soul. Recultivating the power of the origin in the new life was naturally much faster than that of the siren, but it did not mean that he would be able to achieve the same results. There are many experiences, trials, and opportunities in life that may never come again, and the newborn siren finally reached the end of his life. He may have overlooked one thing: the life of a human was much shorter than that of a siren. His experience and validation on the path of cultivation in the past may not be suitable for this short period of 100 years. Before he had time to pass the test of endless arising and ceasing cycle, his life would come to an end. At this time, Enril discovered his whereabouts. When the siren came to the end of his life, he made a decision. He would not be reborn with his former spiritual imprint, but would leave completely. He dispersed all of his power, including his new memories, just to do one thing before his death: to leave a certain imprint in the souls of his direct descendants, to be passed down from generation to generation until one day someone could awaken it. The siren disappeared, but he left behind descendants, and they spread out to form a tribe in the northern part of Assur. The spiritual imprint containing the power to guide them would always be passed down in the soul of a certain tribe from generation to generation. So far, the last one was Samir. Samir was now a 9th-level supreme warrior, but Amon noticed that she could use magic. Although she did not directly use high-level magic, she used her power very well, very much like an oracle who focused on combat. Samir should have awakened the imprint in her soul and received the power to guide her, and then the imprint disappeared. Shortly after the death of her ex-husband, the imperial general, Sinek wanted to marry her. She could either marry the king or watch her people be destroyed. This was the choice Sinek gave her, and Enrol told Sinek about Samir's origin in the oracle. Samir was forced to agree to marry Sinek, and there was an agreement. She could not hurt the king, and the king could not hurt her people. This was the truth about Samir's origin and her marriage to the king. Marduk told Aman another little secret about Faust. Faust, the sage of Assur, was respected by the whole country. He loved knowledge but did not get close to women, and lived a quiet life. But when he saw Samir, his soul never had peace, because he fell in love with Samir. In addition to knowledge, the sage of Assur also yearned for love, but this wish was almost impossible to realize. When Aman came back to his senses, holding the blood-red stone in his hand, the sun had already risen over the valley, and before he knew it, it was already noon. Goliath and Faust ended their conversation, and Faust stood up, bowed to Goliath, and then walked down the hill. Although Aman had been discussing things with Marduk, he also clearly knew what had happened. Goliath did not ask Faust to do anything, but only talked about Faust's wishes and Seneca's actions, pointed out the past, present, and future of the Assur Empire, and proposed a possible choice. Only by changing the king and changing its national policy could this disaster end. To put it bluntly, it was to launch a palace coup and let Emperor Sinek die at the peak of his life. But the new king must have the support of all the forces in the country and be able to control the priests, bureaucrats, and military groups. This person must have enough authority and at the same time must have the desire to change the national policy. With regards to Golier's words, Faust neither agreed nor disagreed. He only silently bade farewell and left. Samir also heard all these words, but she remained expressionless and silent. When Faust walked past her, she also turned around and walked down the hill. Goliath held his wineglass and watched the backs of the two disappear into the boundless peaks. Faust silently walked on the road back to Enrol, his heart suffering. Everything Goliath said was right, and that was what his desire was referring to. He did not say anything negative during the meeting, but in fact, he had already expressed his attitude. The desire in his heart had already sprouted. Samuel was walking right behind him. Faust had allowed a level 9 swordsman to be so close and defenseless. If Samuel wanted to prevent a possible coup in the future, it would be very easy for him to kill him now. But the queen did not make a move. After walking out of the mountains and into the plains, Faust suddenly heard Samir's voice. "No matter what you want to do, I will not hurt Sinek." Faust did not look back, but asked in return, "Do you still believe in that god? My faith is gradually drifting away from him." Samir replied, "My vow may have nothing to do with the god." Faust sighed, "Your Majesty, you can kill me. I would rather die in your hands to end this pain." Samir answered with silence. She did not make a move. The two crossed a stream in the wilderness and walked into a lush forest. Faust suddenly heard an ethereal voice. "Wise man of the world, why are you so miserable? The knowledge you seek has changed the king, and it is not what you want to see. The love you seek is right beside you, but you cannot speak. You are so sick that you do not know where your illness lies. Why do you have to endure and witness the disappointment of yourself? Tell yourself what you want, release your soul, and accept the guidance of that joy." Faust was shocked. The voice came from far away and directly imprinted into his soul. Samir, who was behind him, could not hear it. Even with Faust's means, he could not detect the source of the voice, which meant that this person's magic was superior to his. Perhaps only a god could do this. Years of cultivation had made him very calm in the face of trouble, and he did not show any abnormality on the surface. While walking, he asked in his soul, "Who are you and which god are you?" Then a scene appeared in front of Faust's eyes, directly appearing in the world of soul meditation. A god stood on the clouds in the sky, smiled and replied, "You can call me Sudan, or Mephisto according to the language of Assyria. I am the opponent, helping you to fight against the disappointing fate. This was the manifestation of Ammonius' avatar, completely different from his usual appearance. This image was created by the artists of the world, and came from the murals and carvings of the Empire of Igut. The Empire of Igut once claimed that the name of the blasphemous demon was Sudan, and he tempted people to fight against the will of the gods. If written in the Anunnaki language, it would be Mephisto. The pharaoh of Merneptah did not announce that this person was Ammon, but the craftsmen and artists of the world created this image and depicted it in the murals of shrines and even the carvings of mausoleums. The theme was often that people got rid of the temptation of Sudan and looked up to the glory of the gods, or that the gods defeated Sudan and so on. The artists of Igut gave Sudan a dual image in their works, a perfect and handsome face, but behind him was shrouded in a layer of black mist, and in the black mist was a shadow, and in the shadow was a ferocious long horn and a pointed tail. Ammon had just accidentally learned that Marduk had another name called Paksan, and he could not help but remember that he also had another name called Allaha, and that he also had a human title, Sudan. No one knew that Sudan was Ammon, but this image was become vivid in the imagination of countless people. With just a thought, Ammon manifested this image and appeared in Faust's soul. This was not a sudden idea for no reason, and such an identity happened to be in line with what he wanted to do. Faust instinctively scolded in his soul, "Mephisto, do not shake my faith." Ammon smiled, "If that is your faith, I cannot shake it." The faith of a person has always been the master of their heart. I just want you to examine your heart. Please release your desire and tell yourself how to fulfill it. Along with these words, a piece of information was naturally imprinted into the depths of Faust's soul, precisely hitting the secret of the supreme mage's heart. Ammon knew Faust's desire. What he wanted was not knowledge itself, but the fruit of wisdom. What he wanted was not abstract love, but Samir who was beside him. What he wanted was not the power of magic, but the hope to be able to transcend the suffering of life. This information was like a blazing brand into the soul, and Faust could not help but tremble. Samir, who was behind him, asked, "What's wrong, sage?" Faust hurriedly replied, "Nothing, I just feel pain, the pain of making a choice." Ammon spoke again in his soul, "Faust, if you make a choice and let me help you fulfill your wish, we can make a deal." Faust asked in a half-moan, "What deal?" Ammon had not thought of making any exchange with Faust, but at this moment he felt that this might be another option to test the soul of the human world, so he slowly replied, "Your desire is the master of your heart, and the power that I guide is its servant. When the day comes when it is fulfilled, please offer your soul." Faust asked in reply, "But how can you get it?" "That is the illusory of many friends." Ammon smiled. "The gods have their own means. When the servant becomes the master, you will understand. If you agree, I can tell you an answer right now, and that is to become the source of the power of the gods. And Queen Samir, who is beside you, actually knows this secret. The answer that you have been searching for in the sea of knowledge has long existed in a place that you cannot see." Faust asked again, "You seem to be able to see through the soul of a person. Please tell me, does Samir love me?" Ammon smiled again. "Your desire is the master of faith, and my power is only its servant. So you should ask yourself, will Samir love you? If Cynic is still here, you will never get her. Goliath has already told you what to do, isn't that what you want?" Samir was walking when she suddenly saw Faust turn around and say to her, "Your Majesty, if His Majesty Cynic wants to marry Princess Sicila and set up another queen, I, the Empire's chief high priest, must preside over the ceremony and clearly point out your mistakes." Samir replied with an expressionless face, "With Seneca's madness, he can easily set up 2 queens and change the laws of the empire. But the ceremony indeed needs you to preside over. You should soon receive the order for you to go." "Faust, I'm asking you to go with me. This is both a request and an order. Although I have never exercised this authority, as the chief high priest of the empire, I have the right to request His Majesty to have another queen present during the ceremony, regardless of whether His Majesty intends to depose you or not." Recently, the most important event in the Kingdom of Babylon was the marriage of Princess Sicila. The marriage of a princess to another king was usually a symbol of an alliance between the two kingdoms. It was a very common political marriage. For example, the former pharaoh Lazith II of Igut once married the daughter of the former king of Hittite, Lusir. At that time, the two kingdoms signed a peace treaty after a great war. But now, the situation was clear to everyone. Princess Sisera's marriage to Sinek meant that the kingdom of Babylon submitted to the Assur Empire. This meant that the two kingdoms had acknowledged the current alliance, but it also meant that they were being controlled by someone else. In any case, the weakened Babylon kingdom needed a breather. Many hoped that the beautiful and wise Princess Sisera could bring peace and a turning point to the kingdom. Although the kingdom of Babylon had just been defeated, the dowry of Princess Sisera was still extravagant. Dozens of luxurious carriages were filled with them. The place where Emperor Sinek married the princess was in the former kingdom of Babylon, which had now become the new territory of Assur. Lis was a rich and prosperous city. It was the last of the 6 cities that fell to the Assur Empire. At that time, under Faust's suggestion, the Assur Empire's new policies had been implemented. Thus, the damage to the city was relatively minor, and the prosperity of the past was mostly preserved. After Sinek took over Lis, he moved all the natives to different places. He also moved a large number of people from other occupied areas to settle in Lis. They were given land to serve the kingdom and to pay taxes. Lis was located on the east bank of the Lis River. The Lis River and the lower reaches of the Euphrates River converged, forming a vast plain. Babylon was the birthplace of an ancient civilization. After Sinek took over Lis, his military expansion had reached its limit. The Assur army had to manage the vast occupied areas, and the destroyed areas had yet to be restored. So the emperor decided to temporarily halt his army. Chapter 243. Sinek ordered the construction of 2 buildings in the city. One was the Shrine of Enlil, and the other was the Emperor's Palace. He wanted this city to be his second capital in the new territory. In the mind of this great emperor, in addition to the original capital of Assyria, Nineveh, he wanted to build 2 auxiliary capitals, the other one to be in the plains of Duk, and he had even thought of the location, which was where the city of Talang is today. The Shrine of Enlil was easy to build. The original Marduk shrine in the city would be remodeled. The main building would remain, and the main statue would be replaced with Enlil's. However, it was a little troublesome to transform the original mansion into a palace. Sinek thought that the mansion was too shabby and ordered the nearby buildings to be demolished and rebuilt. What he wanted was a grand and luxurious palace. The Assyrian Empire mobilized a large number of newly conquered slaves to build Seneka's palace. The deadline was very tight. Many craftsmen and slaves died of exhaustion in the quarries, and many were cruelly punished for failing to complete the task. The palace was still under construction, but the main hall and Seneka's residence had already been completed. Sinek planned to marry Princess Sisera here, and the princess would also live in the palace after the wedding. Sinek sent a procession to Babylon to escort the princess, both to escort the princess and to ensure her safety. At some point, there was a rumor that someone wanted to assassinate Princess Sisera. The assassin might be a fanatic from the Assyrian military, and they wanted to stop Sinek from marrying the princess and ending the war. This rumor was very interesting. It was possible that some extremists in the Assyrian military had the idea, but it was the main forces of the Babylon kingdom who wanted to assassinate Princess Sisera. Since there was such a rumor, the Assyrian Empire naturally had to escort the princess safely to Lis. The Babylon kingdom also sent a team of guards, and some warriors who worshipped the princess also followed behind the procession. The procession was rather complicated. In front of the procession was the Assur kingdom's guard of honor. In the middle of the procession were the Babylon kingdom's guards, who were escorting the princess's carriage. Behind the long procession were warriors who were equipped with their own weapons and rations. After leaving Babylon City, they would travel along the west bank of the Lizi River to reach Seneka's palace. It would take them more than half a month to travel, and they would have to camp in many towns along the way. Although everyone had raised their vigilance to guard against the appearance of assassins, the journey out of Babylon City was peaceful. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. On the contrary, Many people spontaneously greeted the princess by the roadside. Some were crying, some were singing poems, and some were representing the nobles of the towns to pay their respects to the princess and present gifts. The princess did not receive any guests. All the gifts were received by the supreme mage Peri, who accompanied her and conveyed her gratitude. On the third day, there was finally a small problem. People almost thought that it was an assassin, but it turned out to be a misunderstanding. That morning, not long after the princess's entourage left the town where they had set up camp, they passed through a stretch of lush green fields. The official road in front of them took a turn, and on the left there was a small hill. There were not many trees on the hill, and it was a grassy slope that was knee-high. Halfway down the mountain, a man shouted from the top of the mountain, "Princess Sicila, I'm here to protect you." The man's voice traveled far and wide, and the entire entourage heard him. His voice caused a commotion. The guards and warriors in the front and back turned around, their bows nocked and their swords unsheathed. Peri, with his staff in hand, jumped onto the roof of the princess's carriage. The well-trained Assyrian warriors at the front had already turned their horses around and rushed to the foot of the hill, raising their heavy crossbows. There was only one person at the top of the mountain. He was wearing the most dazzling warrior armor on the continent. It was made of damask steel and covered with heavy silver. It was also engraved with the patterns of divine spells. This man did not carry a sword. Instead, he had a curved, thong-like scimitar hanging from his waist. The hilt of the scimitar was tied with a silk ribbon, and the hilt was long like a short staff with a flame sprite embedded in the end. Amidst the tense atmosphere, he walked down the hill in big strides with a smile on his face and a spirited look on his face. Crips, the leader of the escort team sent by the Assyrian Empire, had already surrounded the foot of the mountain with his cavalry. "Halt!" he shouted. "Do not trespass on the princess's carriage, or you will be killed." As if he didn't hear him, Madanzo waved at Peri from afar. "Peri, we meet again. I'm Madanzo. Do you still remember me? Oh, I heard you're already a supreme mage, at least the 8th level, right?" Those who didn't know his background wouldn't know how close he was to Peri. Madanzo didn't slow down as he spoke. He strode forward in big strides, already within the range of the crossbows. Peri frowned and was about to shout, but the sound of bowstrings rang out. The knights of the escort team had released their arrows in unison. They only listened to their captain's orders. Crips had already ordered Madanzo to stop, but Madanzo didn't. These people were used to killing on the battlefield, and as soon as they saw Madanzo walk into their range, they shot their arrows without hesitation. The arrows shot by the strong warriors were powerful enough to pierce through a bull. In the blink of an eye, they would turn Madanzo into a hedgehog. Many people at the back of the caravan cried out in alarm. However, Metatro didn't even draw his saber. He didn't dodge or block. He didn't even stop moving. With a wave of his hand, he left a series of afterimages in the air. It was as if his arm had turned into countless arms and caught all the crossbow bolts in his hand. He held a handful of them in his hand. Although the distance was a little far, an ordinary person's skin and flesh would have been rubbed off if he had caught the arrow. It was not easy to catch it, but Metatro had caught it as easily as if it was a stalk of grass. After exclaiming in surprise, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Crips had already unsheathed his sword, and his knights had raised their spears and were ready to charge. They knew that they had encountered a powerful opponent. At this moment, they heard a delicate shout, "Stop! This warrior is my friend. He's here to protect me. Didn't you hear him?" Everyone looked up and saw that Princess Sicila had already lifted the curtain and was standing in front of the carriage shaft. Her silhouette was delicate and her hair was fluttering gently in the morning breeze. However, her pretty face was cold and her voice carried an irresistible majesty. "Did you hear that?" Metatro shouted again in a high-spirited manner. "Her Highness has summoned me. Put down your weapons." As he spoke, he walked towards the caravan at the foot of the mountain. Crips rode up to Princess Sicila and said in a displeased tone, "Your Highness, this man is skilled and we don't know why he's here. You can't act on your own." Princess Sicila retorted, "What do you mean? Do you have the final say? He's a warrior that I personally conferred to the kingdom. When I was kidnapped by the giants on the Saya Plateau, it was he who risked his life to save me and escort me back to the capital. Of course you don't know him, but he's my friend. Perry can testify for me." Perry, who had jumped off the carriage, explained awkwardly, "Yes, his name is Medanzo. He did rescue and protect your highness, so your highness conferred him the title of a noble warrior." "But," Princess Sicila interrupted with a sullen face, "but what? He's my savior, a noble knight. What's wrong with escorting me?" Cripps grumbled in his heart. Of course, there were many heroes of the kingdom who worshipped and followed Princess Sicila. There were dozens of them following behind the caravan, but they were not part of the royal guards and could not disturb the princess's carriage. They could only bring their own rations with them. Who would have thought that Medanzo would come and greet the princess so openly? Cripps straightened his neck and shouted, "I've been ordered by Emperor Cynic to protect your highness. I'll be in charge of all the security along the way. Do not let this dangerous and unknown man get close to your carriage." Princess Sicila was furious. She didn't give him any face and snapped, "Cripps, are you trying to commit treason? It's not up to you to say whether this man is trustworthy or not. Only I have the final say. There's no way you don't know who I am and why I'm going to Assur. If he isn't trustworthy, then there's no one here, including you, who is. I won't stop you from carrying out the orders of the Emperor, but please consider your identity and future. Guards, disperse. Summon the hero." Cripps was choked for a moment. His face turned red, and he almost couldn't speak. He was one of the leaders of Seneca's palace guards and a supreme warrior. He was sent here on a mission to escort the princess to Assur. Originally, he despised the people of Babylon Kingdom. Just now, he was ready to kill Medanzo if he wanted to. But Princess Sicila's words were like a bucket of cold water poured over his head. It was a warning that made his skin crawl. The princess was going to marry the Emperor of Assur and become the Empress of the Assur Empire. No matter what her motives were, once she became the Empress, even if she only won Seneca's favor, it wouldn't be difficult for her to find an opportunity to get rid of him, the leader of the palace guards. If Princess Sicila wanted to kill someone with a borrowed knife to vent her anger, would Emperor Cynic protect the queen or the captain of the royal guards? Princess Sicila's words were clearly hinting, "Don't talk back to me. Don't be fooled by your prestige now. When I become the Empress of Assur, I'll be able to take care of you." Cripps's mind raced as he realized that the princess in front of him wasn't someone to be trifled with. So he bowed and said, "Your Highness, I'm only doing this out of consideration for your safety. Since you have absolute trust in him, then let him come." He then waved his hand and ordered his knights to clear a path. Medanzo walked to the front of the carriage and bowed to the princess. "My beautiful princess, do you still remember what you said back then? When I escorted you from the town of Arcade to the capital of Babylon, you said that on the day of your marriage, you would let us brave men accompany you. I've always remembered it. That's why I came here today." Princess Sicila did say these words, but she was joking with her guards. Someone asked her when she was going to marry Gilgamesh. Princess Sicila didn't answer directly, so she said those words. Today, she was indeed going to get married, but to Emperor Cynic. Princess Sicila looked at Medanzo, and for some reason, her heart was filled with emotions. She wanted to show a noble smile, but it was very faint. She waved her hand gracefully and said, "Thank you, my noble hero." Then she turned to Perry and said in a commanding tone, "Give this hero the best horse you have. Tell him to follow my carriage." Perry was stunned. He wanted to dissuade her but didn't say anything. The supreme mage suddenly realized that the woman in front of him, be it the Princess of Babylon or the Empress of Assur, was not someone to be trifled with. He even regretted accepting the bribe of the Assur Empire. He had been spying on the princess for so many days, and it might be a thankless task to do so. No matter how much pressure the princess was under, the only one who could truly offend her was Emperor Cynic himself. Everyone else had better learn their lesson. So Medanzo rode a pure white horse next to the princess's carriage. In front of him was a dazzling ceremonial guard, and behind him was a luxurious caravan. He was the most eye-catching person in the entire procession. He took out a fiery red cloak out of nowhere and put it over his bright silver armor. Only those in the know would know that he was a brave warrior who had volunteered to protect the princess. But those who didn't know the truth would think that he was the groom who had come to pick up the bride. Princess Sisela was talking to Madanzo through the curtain in the carriage. She said in a low voice, "I heard that you followed Supreme General Amon to Salem." "No, I should call you Ammonius now. It is said that Supreme General Iga was actually a god who walked among the mortals. Is that true?" Madanzo raised his head and answered, "Yes. He is a true god, my only god." For some reason, the princess sighed and said, "You shouldn't have come here. Salem has just fought against the Assyrian Empire in the plains of Duk. If they knew who you are, they would have treated you as a dangerous enemy." Princess Sisela naturally knew who Madanzo was, and so did Peri, the supreme mage who accompanied her. Peri wanted to remind her but was stopped by the princess. Crips, the supreme warrior sent by Sinek, had been living in the capital of Assyria for a long time. He had been in charge of the Assyrian imperial army for a long time, so he didn't know much about the news from afar. Madanzo was only the captain of Supreme General Amon's bodyguard. Even after he came to Salem, he only showed up a few times in the war. It was normal that Crips had not heard of him. Madanzo smiled and said, "This is the territory of the Kingdom of Babylon. I used to be a noble warrior of the Kingdom of Babylon. Why can't I come with you? In order to protect you, I am not afraid of any danger. I will escort you all the way to the Lys River. You will be safe after crossing the river." Madanzo wasn't stupid. He wouldn't cross the river with the convoy into a city guarded by the Assyrian army. He would only escort the princess to a safe place. The princess nodded silently. She couldn't help but ask in a concerned tone, "Before I left Babylon City, I heard the latest news. He was also in the battle against the giant legion. Is he all right?" Madanzo was a little surprised. He immediately understood that the princess was talking about was Gilgamesh. He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. But he still replied politely, "He's fine. He's not as arrogant as he used to be. I wouldn't have noticed him if he hadn't shown up. He actually appeared in the battle as an ordinary archer." The princess was a little surprised. "Oh? How did he dress up? I can't imagine him like that." Madanzo had no choice but to describe the scene of Gilgamesh's appearance on the battlefield. The princess couldn't help covering her mouth as she listened to the shocking battle. Finally, she put her hand on her chest and asked, "Where did he go after the battle? How did he react when he heard the latest news from the Kingdom of Babylon?" There was a hidden meaning in the princess' words. What she really wanted to ask was, how did Gilgamesh react when he heard that Sinek was going to force her to marry him? What did he say? But it wasn't a good time to ask directly. Madanzo sighed and answered, "Unfortunately, I don't know either. I rushed here as soon as I heard the news. I wasn't with Gilgamesh at the time." Then both of them fell silent. The princess looked at the hazy scenery outside the carriage through the gauze curtain, sighing for someone. Madanzo's appearance had evoked her memories of the past. At this moment, the person she missed the most was her ex-fiancé, Gilgamesh, who had never cared about her. Where was Gilgamesh at this moment? Princess Sisela would never have imagined that the once noble hero was now wearing a shabby linen robe and a pair of worn boots, rushing to the Kingdom of Babylon. After entering the city, he went straight to Prince Benut's mansion. When he walked towards the gate, a guard at the gate immediately stopped him. Gilgamesh didn't move. He stood on the stone steps and said, "Please inform the guard that I want to see Prince Benut. My name is Gilgamesh." The bodyguard had already raised his leg to make a faint kick and was about to glare at Gilgamesh when he heard Gilgamesh's last sentence. He froze in place and rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Putting down his leg, he stretched out his head and asked, Are you really Gilgamesh?" Gilgamesh answered calmly, "What good would it do me to pretend to be Gilgamesh in this place?" That's right. Someone pretending to be Gilgamesh in front of Prince Benut's mansion is no different from seeking death. The guard went in to inform the guard of Gilgamesh's arrival. After a while, the gate opened and Prince Benut came out to greet Gilgamesh. He bowed from afar. "Gilgamesh, is it really you? My apologies, my servants have been rude." Gilgamesh shook his head. "They have not been rude. Thank you for coming out to greet me personally. I have an important matter to discuss with you. I wonder if your highness has the time? Chapter 244. When Gilgamesh entered the city of Babylon, Faust was also ordered to rush to the new city of Dulis. As the chief high priest of the Assyrian Empire, he should be the one presiding over such an important ceremony as the coronation of the empress. To Seneca's surprise, Faust also brought another empress, Samir. Seneca was displeased. Although he didn't ask for Samir's opinion before marrying Princess Sicila, he still wanted to change the laws of the empire. He didn't want to reprimand Faust in front of everyone, so he asked Samir, "The war on the plains of Duk is not going well, why are you here?" Samir replied, "I'm here to ask your majesty, do you want to abolish me and appoint a new empress, or do you want to marry Princess Sicila? If you're marrying a concubine, I think I should be present." That was what the sage imperial tutor had requested. "If you want to abolish the empress and appoint a new empress, I want to hear it in person. What have I done wrong?" Seneca's expression was a little awkward. He wanted to explode, but he held back. He waved his hand and said, "Warder, show me the blueprint of my empire." The court's supreme mage bowed and walked to the center of the inner hall. With a wave of his staff, he showed the crowd a bright light. The light showed what seemed to be a battle sand table. After unfolding, it was a three-dimensional map of the continent, with different regions marked with different colors. The gold area was the former territory of the Assyrian Empire. The city of Nineveh was a bright spot. There were two yellow areas. One was the 6 newly conquered cities of the Kingdom of Babylon, and the location of the city of Reis was also marked with a gold. The other area was bordering the Assyrian Empire through the Assyrian Plateau, occupying half of the fertile land of the plains of Duk in the north. The location of Salem was also marked with a gold. Obviously, the yellow area in the plains of Duk was the land that the Assyrian Empire planned to occupy. In the eyes of Emperor Seneca, Salem already belonged to the Assyrian Empire. What was even more intriguing was that there was a pink area on the map, which not only included the current territory of the Kingdom of Babylon, but also extended westward, including the land on the west bank of the Euphrates River that was previously occupied by the Hittite Kingdom, the former city of Marduk, and the entire southern part of the plains of Duk. This was Seneca's vision for the Assyrian Empire. Not only did he want to control the entire Kingdom of Babylon, but he also wanted to expand his sphere of influence beyond the west bank of the Euphrates River and occupy the entire plains of Duk. At that time, it would be a great empire like never before. The Euphrates River, the Lis River, and the Saya Plateau, where they originated, would all belong to the empire. The people sitting in the inner hall were all important ministers of the empire. Other than Samir, Faust, and White, there was also the Prime Minister Alpha and the leaders of the two frontline armies. Shinnok pointed at the blueprint and said to Samir, "Do you see the positions of the 3 gold dots on it? They are the 3 capitals of the Assyrian Empire. Needless to say, we are now in the city of Tunis. Queen Sicila will live in the palace here, symbolizing the rule of the Assyrian Empire over the Kingdom of Babylon." Samir frowned slightly and asked, "Then what about the other capital? Who are you preparing it for?" Shinnok smiled and said, "For my queen. That is the other capital I want to build, in which there will be the most magnificent palaces and shrines, and the palace in the plains of Duk will belong to you." Samir's expression did not show any surprise, and he said lightly, "Your Majesty, you are very thoughtful." Shinnok pointed to the location of the city of Salem and said, "Although the giant legion has lost the battle, the war in the Kingdom of Babylon has subsided. Soon, I will mobilize the elite corps into the plains of Duk and crush the resistance of Salem in one fell swoop. As long as Salem is captured, the northern part of the plains of Duk will become the new territory of the Assyrian Empire. In addition to the existing city of Enril and the city of Salem, the eastern and western parts of the city are enough to develop 3 new cities. At that time, I will specially build a new capital and an imperial palace for you and my Empress Samir." The ministers all stood up and saluted, "Great King, the invincible Assyrian Emperor, the whole continent will submit to your majesty." Faust frowned inwardly. The blueprint in front of him clearly outlined Shinaka's ambitions, and his strategy was obviously divided into 3 steps. The first step was to capture the eastern part of the Lys River and the northern part of the plains of Duk. So far, this step had been largely achieved, and the only small mistake was that they did not successfully capture Salem. The second step was also close to success, which was to control the entire kingdom of Babylon through Princess Sisela, marry her, and make her the queen of Babylon. Shinaka's display of such a strategic blueprint in public was both a consolation and a warning to Samir. He was going to build a new capital for her, symbolizing his rule over the new territory of the plains of Duk. At the same time, he was also reminding Samir not to cause trouble, as marrying Princess Sisela was part of the empire's strategy. Samir did not say anything, and excused himself from the celebration with the excuse that he was tired from the long journey after the war. The ministers were still taking turns to offer their blessings and praise to Emperor Shinak. Shinak was very dissatisfied with Empress Samir's departure. The Empress had been very cold to him in recent years, almost never even smiling. She even used the excuse that she was practicing high-level body arts and did not even live with him. But Shinak had always tolerated her, and the reason was simple. Compared to a woman, a 9th-level supreme warrior who was almost invincible on the battlefield was much more significant. Moreover, this supreme warrior was the Empress, and it was a great boost to the morale of the Imperial Army. Watching Samir leave, Shinak asked Faust in a low voice, "Your Majesty, the Empress seems to be in a bad mood. Why did you let her come?" Faust smiled, "Your Majesty, if she doesn't come now, she will be even more dissatisfied in the future. Why don't you just accept it? This is the true demeanor of an emperor. Perhaps you don't understand women very well, but what Empress Samir wants is not a new capital and a palace specially built for her." Shinak looked at Faust. Oh? Could it be that the sage imperial tutor, who has always been cultivating alone, understands women better than me? Faust lowered his head. Perhaps I don't understand either. Princess Sisela's caravan traveled for more than 10 days. They spent the night in the last town on the west bank of the Lys River. The next day, they would cross the river and enter the city of Lys, which was occupied by the Assyrian Empire. The river in front of them was the new border between the Assyrian Empire and the Kingdom of Babylon. Shinak sent a large force to cross the river on the east bank. Although it was said that they were waiting for the princess, it was actually a show of force. That night, in a forest not far from the Lys River crossing, the supreme mage Gekate led a group of priests and warriors to set up camp. They did not light a fire, and their weapons gleamed in the dark. They were discussing the plan to assassinate Princess Sisela. They had to make their move before the crossing of the river. Once the princess crossed the river, they would have no chance. Under the moonlight, there was a sand table in the middle of the clearing. It was the location of the ambush. It was a valley road between 2 mountains. There was a string of pebbles on the road, representing the caravan and the guards escorting the princess. Gekate pointed to the sand table. We're almost at the crossing of the Lys River. Nothing has happened for so many days, they should be at their most relaxed. The most elite guards in the convoy were the guards of honor from the Assur Empire, led by a supreme warrior. At the back of the convoy was a group of warriors from the Kingdom of Babylon, and in the middle was Princess Sisela's personal guard. We don't need to fight all the guards. We'll choose the narrowest part of the road and launch our attack from the middle. Once we succeed, we'll quickly disperse and retreat to the mountains. No one is allowed to stay. I've already arranged for our men to spread the news in the kingdom. Some will say that Princess Sisela committed suicide, while others will say that she was assassinated by a fanatic from the Assyrian army. A priest nodded. We've already spread the news that someone from the Assyrian army is trying to assassinate Princess Sisela. Let Shinak investigate it himself. We'll set up a magic formation on the mountain. Before we strike, we'll destroy the rocks and cut off the caravan. We have to end the battle quickly. But the supreme mage by the princess' side, Perry, isn't easy to deal with. Now, I've heard that there's also a meddlesome Medanzo. Another priest interrupted, Leave Perry to me. Lord Gekate and General Ayesi, keep Medanzo busy. The rest of you, attack the princess carriage with all your might. Once you succeed, don't continue fighting. By the time the guards in the front and back react, everything will be over." This man was masked and had a sword at his waist. He looked like a warrior, but his voice sounded like that of a supreme mage, Cain. Cain had also joined the assassination team, but he wasn't here to assassinate the princess. Decate wanted to set up a trap on the mountain road to cut off the princess carriage. Little did he know that Perry would find out about his plan in the morning, and that there was a trap waiting for him. Decate's men from the Babylon Academy of Magic as well as the Babylon army would all be killed in one fell swoop. Prince Benut would be accused of being the mastermind behind the princess assassination. Cain couldn't help but smile as he discussed the assassination plan with Decate. He could almost see himself and Perry capturing Decate alive together. Cain could not help but smile as he discussed the assassination plan with Decate. At this moment, Decate suddenly raised his head and made a warning gesture. Everyone stopped talking and picked up their weapons. "Don't be nervous. It's me. Prince Benut sent me." A group of warriors emerged from the forest in the distance. Behind them were a dozen or so priests. In the middle of them was the head of the Babylon army, General Robin of the kingdom. Surprised, Decate put away his staff and bowed. "How did you find this place, head of the legion?" Robin replied, "His Highness already knew what you wanted to do." A group of priests and warriors suddenly disappeared. How could it not attract attention? "He ordered me to keep an eye on you. His Highness has forgiven you for the assassination of the princess, but you must stop immediately." Decate said anxiously, "But you should know why I'm doing this. Now that everything is ready, we just need to." Robin interrupted him firmly, "I've already found this place. Can you guarantee that the Asur Empire hasn't thought of this? If you really try to assassinate the princess, you will only be throwing your life away and putting His Highness in a disadvantageous position. I'm here to carry out His Highness's orders. If you don't want to commit treason, come back with me immediately." Cain was very disappointed. When he saw Robin appear, he realized that his plan to lure Decate and the others into a trap had failed. Decate and Cain were unwilling to give up, but their commander had arrived with the prince's orders, so they lowered their heads and walked over. The assassination attempt had failed before it could even be carried out. Early the next morning, when Princess Sisela's convoy set off again, Medanzo noticed that something was wrong. The princess did not sit in her original carriage, but in a carriage protected by a magic formation. She blended in with the convoy transporting the dowry. Many guards were also hiding in the carriages with weapons in their hands. A few new faces suddenly appeared in the group. They seemed to be experts. They were dressed as ordinary warriors and accompanied the carriages on both sides. It was clear that they were lying in ambush, waiting for the assassins to come. Metatro asked Perry what was going on, and Perry told him that there was a long and narrow road between two mountains. It was the most suitable terrain for an ambush, so they had to make preparations in advance to prevent any accidents. Medanzo did not say much. Today was probably the last day he would be escorting Princess Sisela. He was here to protect the princess, so it was better to be prepared. Not long after the convoy set off, they entered a long and narrow valley with steep cliffs on both sides. It was perfect for an ambush. But even when the convoy left the mountains, the surroundings were still quiet. Nothing happened. When the convoy reached the plains, another group of warriors emerged from the forest on both sides. The leader shook his head at Cripps, indicating that he too had not found anything. It seemed that not only the convoy was prepared, but there were also ambushes in the mountains. If the assassins chose to strike here, they would all be caught in one fell swoop. After leaving the mountains and entering the plains, Princess Sisela returned to her carriage. The Lys River crossing was not far ahead. Medanzo, still in his red robe, rode beside the princess's carriage on his white horse. The two groups of warriors that emerged from the forest also met up with the guards. They all heaved a sigh of relief. Just then, the sound of galloping horses could be heard again. The guards could not help but feel nervous. Medanzo looked back and saw a group of warriors bearing the banner of Prince Benut galloping towards them. They had openly displayed their banner, and Prince Benut himself was here. It was obvious that they were not here to assassinate the princess. A voice shouted, "Your Highness, Prince Binut has come to see you off." It was Robin, the commander of Babylon's army. The convoy came to a halt. Prince Binut circled around to the side of Princess Sisela's carriage. The princess lifted the curtain and asked, "My dear nephew, why are you here?" Prince Binut bowed from the back of his horse. "My dear aunt, Binut is very sad that you are going to marry far away. I was too busy with the affairs of the kingdom to see you off. Today I have come all the way to the border. I will personally see you off at the crossing and host a banquet for the warriors of the Assyrian Empire. I will express my gratitude to you on behalf of the kingdom of Babylon." Princess Sisela smiled and waved at him. "It's rare for you to come all the way to see me off. Come, sit in my carriage. We will go to the crossing together." Prince Binut dismounted and said, "That's exactly what I was thinking. I would like to ask to ride with you, aunt." He left his guards and boarded Princess Sisela's carriage. Apart from him and the princess, there were also the princess's two maids in the carriage. Prince Binut and Princess Sisela rode in the same carriage. Madanzo was listening attentively to what they were talking about. As soon as Prince Binut sat down, he said calmly, "My aunt, one of my men tried to assassinate you. The original plan was set today. Fortunately, I discovered it in time and stopped it." Princess Sisela did not know what to say. She sighed and lowered her head. "I can understand why they did that. Thank you for stopping it. Perhaps it would be better for your position in the kingdom if they succeeded." Prince Binut shook his head and said, "No matter what happened between us in the past, you are innocent right now. On the other hand, your marriage with Sinak may not be a bad thing for the kingdom of Babylon." Princess Sisela glanced at her nephew, who was 2 years older than her, and said meaningfully, "Your men tried to assassinate me, but not only did they not succeed, they also did you no good. If you are really that scheming, make sure to be more careful next time. Don't let them prepare in advance and turn it into a trap for you." Both Prince Binut and Madanzo were shocked. Princess Sisela's words were clearly reminding them that the assassination plan had been leaked long ago. How could there be a spy from the Assyrian Empire in such a secretive operation? It was a sad reminder. Princess Sisela was also hinting to Binut that if he really wanted to assassinate her, he should not have made such a mistake. If he did not have the ability, he should not have done such a thing. If he could not do such a thing well, how could he be a competent monarch in the future? The conversation between Princess Sisela and Prince Binut was clearly heard by Peri and the Assyrian Empire's spies. If Prince Binut wanted to send her any message, even if it was just a piece of paper, the detection magic circle in the carriage would be able to detect it at any time. There was no chance for them to discuss any conspiracy. When the convoy arrived at the ferry, Prince Binut personally helped Princess Sisela out of the carriage. At this moment, Princess Sisela's expression suddenly froze. Binut really did have a plan. He helped her out of the carriage. When he let go, he gently touched the back of her hand. Something was missing from her hand, but at the same time, something was added. Chapter 245. It was made by Ammonius with the venom he had obtained from Scorpion the Fifth. Normally, the venom would not leak out. But if you take it off and break it, it will form a sharp thorn that can cut through the skin. It was prepared for Sinek. Ammonius gave it to Gilgamesh, who in turn gave it to me. If you are unfortunate enough to be trapped in the Assyrian Empire, you can decide when and if you want to use it. But we don't want you to use it yourself. If possible, please try to lure Sinek to the outskirts of the mountains. Gilgamesh will come and save you. The fate of the kingdom cannot be borne by a woman like you. A true hero should be prepared. It was made from precious materials such as hawksbill, coral, and shells. It was a kind of ornament used by noble women on the continent to decorate their nails. Unlike other jewelry, it didn't need to be unloaded and unloaded every day because the nails wouldn't sweat. It was made with a colorless, transparent, and fragrant glue made from fish bones. Unless the nails grew long, it could be trimmed off along with the nails, just like a part of the nails. In other words, no matter if the princess underwent the most rigorous body search or detection magic search, even if all the good things on her, including her undergarments and accessories, were changed, the shell would still be there. Only someone who knew the lifestyle of noble women very well could come up with this idea. Gilgamesh was probably the one who came up with it. However, that piece of armor was personally made by a god, and that god was once the descendant of the best master craftsman on the continent. Usually, there was no leakage of poison, and as long as it was not taken off or broken, no one would be able to detect any abnormalities. Even the most brilliant detection magic would not be able to detect anything wrong with it. After Amon succeeded, he had asked several supreme mages around him to test it. As for the message attached to the shell, it could only be released once and would disappear without a trace. It was left in the shell by Amon according to Gilgamesh's request. Only one person could hear it, no one else could detect it. Princess Sisela subconsciously clenched her fists and hid her nails in her palms. She wanted to look down at her hands, but she resisted the urge. Her lips were pale and her body was trembling. She didn't expect Gilgamesh to go to Binut, let alone ask Prince Binut to bring such a thing. The poison armor was prepared for Sinak, but it was also prepared for Princess Sisela herself. Princess Sisela could have used it to kill Sinak, but it would have been easier for her to kill herself with it. These were the choices she had to make when she had no other choice. However, Princess Sisela has another option, which is to not use it at all. Gilgamesh had said that he did not want to see her use it. What, then, did Jill mean? The message also mentioned the hope that she could lure Sinak into the wilderness and he would come to her rescue. If Princess Sisela could have escaped, she would have done so long ago. But now, she had no other choice. The message was clearly hinting that someone was looking for an opportunity to assassinate Shinnok. She was hoping that Princess Sisela would create that opportunity. Was Gilgamesh trying to assassinate Sinak? Did he trust her that much? Wasn't he afraid that she would tell Sinak? What should she do? Princess Sisela was in a trance before she crossed the river. Even when Prince Binut hosted a banquet for the Assyrian Empire's wedding procession, she excused herself by saying that she was tired from the journey. After the banquet, Princess Sisela crossed the Lys River. Madanzo bid farewell to her. The princess expressed her gratitude and respect to the brave warrior and gave him the pure white horse. But Madanzo noticed that the princess was distracted as she spoke, as if her mind had drifted far away. He watched as the princess's ship safely reached the other side of the river under the escort of the warrior warships. Then he left on his white horse. Prince Binut rewarded the folk warriors who escorted the princess and asked Madanzo to stay for a chat. He was not only trying to express his gratitude, but also to win him over. But Madanzo was not in the mood to say anything. He politely declined Prince Binut's hospitality and left, quickly disappearing into the forest at the end of the field. There were still people who wanted to follow Madanzo, but Prince Binut waved them off. Metatro rode upstream along the west bank of the Uris River, neither too fast nor too slow, but he did not stop. When the sun went down, he passed through a ravine and disappeared. The messenger of the Garden of Eden had hidden his tracks. Unless someone used detection magic not far away to conduct a large-scale disturbance detection, they would not be able to find him. Madanzo walked until late at night. When the moon was high in the sky, he turned his horse eastward towards the Lys River. The river flowed continuously under the moonlight, reflecting the cold and gentle light. The sound of the flowing water was especially clear in the night, as if someone was singing and talking about something. On the other side of the river were rolling hills. In the north, there were shrubs connecting to the primitive forest, and in the south, there were grassy slopes connecting to the fields. Metatro urged the horse to walk directly into the river. The horse instinctively stopped at the riverside. Metatro waved his hand and the white horse suddenly raised its head and galloped forward. It actually rode on the waves and galloped across the river. Madanzo's fiery red cloak fluttered in the night breeze, revealing the silver warrior's armor. He crossed the river and disappeared into the night. Princess Sisela crossed the Lys River. The opposite bank was heavily guarded by the soldiers of the Assur Empire and the welcoming party sent by the city of Lys. As the fiancée of the Assur Great Emperor, her daily life was naturally taken care of by her maidservants. The male guards could only protect her from the outside. A temporary camp was set up at the western bank of the river. Cedar wood was cut down to build an exquisite house, surrounded by large tents made of animal hide. Escorted by the guards, Princess Sisela walked towards the temporary camp. There was already a group of Asur's palace maids waiting for her. The maids and guards all bowed to the princess. In the middle of the group stood a pen pal. She was also a woman, but she looked even more muscular than the burly men. The princess was tall and slender, but her height only reached her shoulders. She was a mighty female giant. She did not wear the clothes of a palace maid, nor was she dressed like an armored warrior. She looked very conspicuous. The princess also noticed one thing. Be it the palace maids or the guards, none of them dared to approach the female giant. There was no one within 5 steps of her. As the crowd bowed to her, the princess stepped forward and asked, "Who is this? Why isn't she bowing to me?" The officer of the Ministry of Interior who had accompanied Princess Sisela to the camp looked embarrassed and a little scared. He was about to explain when the female giant heard the princess's words and said in a loud voice, "Your Royal Highness, I'm Ely. I'm here to protect you and to keep an eye on you. If I don't want to, I don't even have to bow to Cynic. This is the special permission of the Asur Great Emperor. From now on, until you officially marry Cynic, you must listen to my orders. As for whether you are happy or not, I don't care." Crips, the supreme warrior behind the princess, couldn't help but frown. He had always been the commander of Cynica's imperial guards, but he had no idea where His Majesty found such a woman. He had never seen her before. But judging from the aura she exuded, she was at least a supreme warrior stronger than him. Was she sent by Queen Samir? Crips pondered to himself, but he didn't dare to say anything. What Crips didn't know was that this female giant Ely was actually a god, the flying bull goddess worshipped by the Assyrians. In the pantheon of gods, she wasn't a true god, but a 9th-level divine emissary. When the Asur Great Emperor built the Temple of Enrol in Lisbon, he prayed to the gods and reported his plan to marry Princess Sisela. As a result, Enrol sent a divine emissary to assist and protect him. 9th-level divine emissaries who had passed the test of endless arising and ceasing cycle were known as gods in the mortal world. Many of their habits were the same as the real gods, and they were unwilling to directly intervene in the battles of the mortal world. Why would they come here to monitor the princess? In fact, it was Ely who took the initiative to ask Enrol. Her twin sister, the flying bull goddess Zhu Xian, was shot down by Gilgamesh during the battle between the Legion of Lung and the Legion of Giants. Princess Sisela didn't know about this, but she felt surprised and wronged. Did Cynic send such a person to pick her up to give her a show of strength? As a princess, she had never been treated like this before. The enchanting Princess Sisela was charming, but the female giant Wu didn't have the slightest bit of tenderness for the fairer sex. Under her supervision, Princess Sisela entered the house made of cedar wood. Hot water was already prepared in the back hall, and palace maids were standing by the big wooden tub with clothes and brand new accessories. Wu said with a straight face, "Your Highness, please take a bath and change your clothes." Her tone left no room for negotiation. As soon as the door was closed, she ordered the princess to take off her clothes and everything on her body, including her accessories. As the princess bathed, the female giant stared at her like a tiger watching its prey. She even ordered the princess to remove all her clothes and accessories, not even her earrings. Princess Sisela's charming body was like a perfect work of art. Her fair skin was sprinkled with roses, and the petals of her petals glowed in the warm water. It was as if she was the most charming man in the world. Even the palace maids who served her in the bath were admiring her. But Wu's gaze was as if she was looking at a block of wood. She kept staring at the princess's private parts, giving her goosebumps. When the princess was finally done with her bath and grooming, she changed her clothes into brand new clothes prepared by the Assyrian Empire. Although they were luxurious, it was obvious that the Assyrian Empire was wary of the princess. He wouldn't allow the princess to hide anything that could be used to assassinate him. Fortunately, after the bath and dinner, Wu didn't feel too embarrassed. Princess Sisela didn't ask where her clothes and accessories went. Only the ornaments on her nails were still there. The next day, they set off again for Lisi. Princess Sisela was still sitting in the same carriage, but the guardian hero was no longer Metatro riding a white horse, but Ili, the female giant walking with her head held high. When the carriages entered Lisi, there was a grand welcoming ceremony. The Assyrian Empire personally came out to welcome them. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Princess Sisela alighted from the carriage and walked towards Cynic. Her dress fluttered in the wind, and her charming face and slender figure were like the petals of a flower in the morning breeze. Even Cynica's eyes lit up. Cynic had long heard that Princess Sisela was a famous beauty in the Babylon kingdom. Due to her identity, such rumors were often exaggerated. But this was the first time he saw Princess Sisela in person. He didn't expect her to be even more beautiful than the rumors said. Cynic couldn't help but recall the scene before the year of harvest. At that time, he saw the valiant and heroic Samir on the battlefield for the first time. It was also indescribably breathtaking, as if all the beauty and elegance in the world had been stolen by that woman. But the Lady Sisela before him had a completely different temperament from Samir. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed that the beauty of a woman could reach two completely different extremes. Princess Sisela was delicate, like a gentle breeze blowing her fragrance. She made people want to spoil her, but at the same time, they wanted to tear her apart. She greatly aroused the desire of a hero to conquer and possess her. Cynic couldn't help but sigh with the feeling of being the ruler of the world. Only a great emperor like him could have such a vast territory and such beauty. While Cynic was immersed in his thoughts, Princess Sisela gracefully walked up to him and bowed. "Your Majesty, I'm here." Her voice was pleasing to the ear. There was a tinge of fear and bitterness in her timid voice. Cynic helped her up and held her arm. "My princess, the future empress of the empire, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Everyone has been waiting to welcome you, to praise your beauty and my achievements." Princess Sisela grinned. "I've been a little worried before I came. The rumors on the continent say that you're terrifying. But now that I've seen you in person, I can't believe you're so handsome and mighty." Her smile was so natural and charming that it could melt gold and iron. It made Cynica's heart bloom with joy. Cynic held the princess' hand and boarded a luxurious carriage. Escorted by the guards, they passed through the city and received the worship of the people. Naturally, there were many people in the city who followed the emperor's orders to welcome them. They sang songs of praise and cheered. But there were also many people who knelt on both sides of the street. Most of them were peasants who built the new capital. Many of them were slaves who were conquered and moved here. They were former citizens of the Babylon kingdom. Their prayers and kneeling were not out of coercion. They were completely spontaneous and sincere. Some of them even had tears in their eyes. They didn't walk towards Cynic, but towards Princess Sisela. They knew very well why Princess Sisela married Cynic. When Cynic saw this, he laughed in the carriage and said, "My princess, do you see these people? In the near future, you will become the revered queen of Babylon." Princess Sisela smiled sweetly. "I only hope that your majesty will treat them well, just like how you treat your people. When you become my queen, and then the queen of Babylon, the people of Babylon will naturally become my subjects," Cynic said proudly. The carriage passed through the city and arrived in front of the magnificent palace. Princess Sisela pouted her pink lips, showing a look of dissatisfaction. "My princess, what's wrong?" Cynic asked in a puzzled tone. "Your Majesty, are you going to hold your wedding here?" Princess Sisela asked in a coquettish tone. "Of course it's here," Cynic replied. "Lys is the capital I built, and this palace is also prepared for you. The chief priest of the empire will preside over the ceremony and confer you the title of queen. Is there anything you're not satisfied with?" Princess Sisela hugged Cynica's arm with one hand, showing a pitiful and aggrieved expression. She pointed at the unfinished buildings around the palace square with the other hand. "The palace is very beautiful. Thank you, Your Majesty. But it's still in ruins. How can the great Emperor Cynic marry the queen in such a place?" Cynica's face darkened. "The craftsmen are too slow. Do you want me to punish them? I can behead the person who built the project and replace them with a group of capable slaves." Princess Sicilla covered her mouth and exclaimed, "Your Majesty, are you going to kill someone on the day of the wedding? No, that will only spoil the atmosphere." "Then what do you want to do?" Cynic asked. Princess Sicilla hugged Seneca's arm with both hands, pinching his arm with her jade-like fingers. "Your Majesty, to be able to marry a hero like you is the dream of every woman on the continent. How can the invincible Emperor Cynic confer the title of queen in a half-built house? I wonder if your Majesty has heard of my hobby. Perhaps you should hold the ceremony in a tent that symbolizes the conquest of the continent." Cynic was taken aback for a moment, then he smiled. "I've long heard of your hobby. You like to disguise yourself and travel around the kingdom. You also like to go hunting in the wilderness. That's my hobby as well. Hunting is a form of training for heroes in times of peace, but war is another form of hunting. Do you want me to set up the most luxurious tent in the world and hold the wedding in the hunting grounds?" Princess Sicilla smiled happily, her body softly leaning on Seneca's arm. "The entire continent is your Majesty's hunting grounds. Your wedding must show that you are a peerless hero." Cynic slapped his thigh. "Very well then. I will confer the title of queen in the hunting grounds and hold a hunting feast. Let everyone celebrate this grand occasion." Hunting was a way for noble warriors to show off their martial prowess during times of peace. Emperor Cynic was also a keen hunter, and Princess Sicilla's proposal was just what he liked. With Seneca's status, he could hold the wedding as he wished. The reason he made this decision was because the palace was not yet finished, but also because he liked it. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.